From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, Northern Ireland's Chief Constable says there's nothing to suggest a knife attack in Belfast last night was terror-related. A man's in hospital with serious injuries to his eyes, face and neck. A Sudanese national has been charged with attempted murder and is due in court tomorrow. Speaking to Andrew Marr on LBC, Sinn Féin MP for Belfast North, John Finucane, praised the members of the public who intervened.
No doubt whatsoever that their actions have saved this man's life, and what they have witnessed and seen along with the members of the public and indeed the police and the ambulance service was obviously quite dramatic and brutal, and stay with them. I've spent most of today talking to residents, those who were there and also those who have woken up to the aftermath of this, and they are all really badly shaken up by this. This is a horrific event that has been visited upon their community.
There are fears of trouble as people protest the killing. There are fears of trouble as people protest the assault. The Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has told Andrew Marr she hopes that the police are now allowed to do their job in peace.
I understand the concern that people have, how angry they will feel, but the last thing we need to see is more disorder on the streets in response to violence. Violence should not lead to further violence, and it is right now, of course, that the police carry out their investigation.
Donald Trump says the US must respond after Iran shot down an American Apache helicopter that was patrolling the Strait of Hormuz. He says the two pilots involved are both safe and uninjured. Military analyst Sean Bell says Washington was waiting to see if they were okay before saying Iran were behind the attack.
I think what's most interesting, though, about this is that they wouldn't have just gone out and collected these guys, because if you do that, it shows the Iranians where you're looking. So there'll undoubtedly be a series of deception operations going on around the place, and it might well have been they just sent one of these little boats out while something else was going on to get these crew out.
Two men have been jailed following last week's protest in Southampton over the murder of student Henry Novak. They've been given sentences of just under and just over 3 years for offences including violent disorder. The Conservatives want to scrap rules requiring public bodies in Great Britain, such as schools and hospitals, to consider promoting equality in their decisions. In what the party described as the first step in a programme to restore common sense, Kemi Badenoch said the public sector equality duty has resulted in some groups being preferred over others. The Tory Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, told Andrew Marr on LBC too many bad decisions are being made.
We've seen that with this ridiculous legal case where terrorist prisoners in prison, where they were put into isolation understandably, and somebody challenged it on the grounds that Muslim prisoners were disproportionately affected because the majority of terrorists in prison are Islamist terrorists. That is clearly a ridiculous decision.
Supporters of the public sector equality duty say it's led to older people's needs being considered in transport and social care planning, and women's needs being considered during pregnancy. Parents who care for their seriously ill children could soon get better job protections under new government proposals. Ministers have opened a consultation on helping carers in Great Britain get back to work. 3 Americans and 1 Italian have been announced for NASA's Artemis 3 mission in a year's time. They'll launch aboard the Orion spaceship and test commercial landers that will hopefully take people to the moon on future missions. Dr. Matt Bothwell is an astronomer and author based at the University of Cambridge and told LBC the ambition is high.
The objective of the Artemis program is to be a stepping stone to the exploration of the solar system, really. The Apollo program, the aim was to get to the moon. With Artemis, the aim is to get to the moon and then Mars and even beyond, maybe.
In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 145 points at 10,227. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, showers becoming less frequent into this evening, but sticking around in the west. Winds easing and turning chilly, lows of 4 to 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Matt Hewitt.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's 4 minutes past 7 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10. Now, I want to talk about stop and search, which is something that I haven't said for quite a long time on the programme. But there was a time, I would say, between 2011 and 2017, when it was the subject of numerous phone-ins on LBC, because it became a real bone of contention, particularly when Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, decided to order the police to cut the number of stop and searches they did, particularly on black and ethnic minority people. I've got the figures here. Back in 2011, there were 102,500 stop and searches done on black people. And this is in England and Wales, a lot of them in London, obviously. By 2023, 2024, that number had been slashed to 22,400. So effectively an 80-90% reduction on what there was in 2011. Now, what were the reasons for this? It was because it was thought that the number of stops and searches that were being carried out were disproportionate to the population. And those opposing Theresa May's policy said, oh, yes, but if you look at the number of crimes that particular part of the population committed, they're not disproportionate. But it was undoubtedly creating problems between the police and local communities. So that was the policy that the Conservatives introduced. There was a blip in it when it went up to 52,000 in 2019-20, but soon came down again. Kemi Badenoch has made a speech today where she is saying, no, we need to go back to introducing more stop and searches. She says more young black men and black boys should be stopped and searched by police. Now, remember, this is a black woman saying this. And I think we need to remember that in this context. She said authorities had failed to save lives for fear of being called racist. She wants to triple stop and search rates to crack down on knife crime, but said some people would inevitably feel, quotes, uncomfortable with the fact that more black youths would be affected. Well, let's say she gets into power, she is the Prime Minister, and her Home Secretary, presumably Chris Philp, implements this policy. Would that just fuel more tension between the police and black youths? We'll come to your views on that in a moment, 0345 6060 973. Or do you agree with her that, no, this is something that has been done for maybe the best of reasons, but they were politically correct reasons, and what we need to do is to get knife crime down, and this is the best way to do it. Aggie Chambray, our Deputy Political Editor, is with us. Take us through what she said.
So Kemi Badenoch today in a major speech talking about wanting to triple stop and search hiring to 10,000 more police officers, because she says her party believes this will lead to safer streets. And she said in this speech in Westminster earlier today that she was afraid it didn't matter if more black boys are searched because it means more black lives will be saved. You quoted some of the numbers that have just now, Ian, and a report earlier this year found that black people are up to 48 more times more likely than white people to be stopped and searched by police in some of London's best off areas. And she was asked when she was speaking to reporters after the speech if calling for more black boys to be stopped and searched would just inflame tensions.
There will be some people who will feel uncomfortable. But the truth is that when black boys are searched more knives are found. The incidence of knife carrying is higher. So we can't leave people to carry knives because we think that we've searched enough people for today, because that means someone else's life gets lost. And the people who tell me more than anyone that they want stop and search are the mothers of young black boys who have been killed by their peers. They are killing each other. They're not going to look for people from other communities to kill. The carrying of knife crime harms the knife carrier's community before it harms all others. I want to save those lives. I want to save the people who are most at risk, whatever their background. And if that means doing some tough stuff, then I'm going to do some tough stuff.
Now, during that speech, she also took aim at police guidance that she said explicitly stated people should be treated differently based on their protected characteristics. And it was also in this speech that she talked about her party, if they get back into power, would ditch some things in equality law. She said her party would seek to abolish a duty for teachers, nurses and police officers to consider protected characteristics enshrined in equality law. And she also argued that Britain took a wrong turn after that landmark Macpherson report into the racist killing of Stephen Lawrence.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, who was the head of its operation at Blunt 2, which led to a 70% reduction of youth murders across London. Kevin, very good evening. What do you make of what Kemi Badenoch has said today? Because if she was Prime Minister and implemented this, it would be a major departure from what's been happening for the last 10 years.
It would. And just before I fully answer that, let me just tell you what Blunt 2 was about. In 2008, we had 29 youth murders across London. By 4 years later, we were down to 8 youth murders a year across London. So that equates to probably 100 young lives saved from being killed and probably a couple of hundred from getting life imprisonment for murder or being involved. The key point about all of that is that black youths are 30 times more likely to die by murder than white youths in London. So there's some merit to that. And I'll just give you an anecdote. The other week I was flying back from Africa on a plane and went to the baggage belt in Gatwick, and I got chatting with a black lady there who'd just come back from a holiday in Gambia, and she was full of it. And of course we started talking about families. And then she told me that tragically her 15-year-old son had been killed 10 years before in North London by knife crime. And as our conversation developed, she became more and more vociferous about the urgent need for police to stop and search more youths, particularly black youths, because she didn't want any other black women losing her son like them. So I kind of give you a bit of feedback there from a black woman. And I give you the stats that by doing enhanced stop and search, as we did in Operation Blunt 2, we saved over 100 lives. And Ian, I think that's an important point that we should not forget here about why the murder rate is not as bad as it could be. And that is because of the Afghanistan war. During that war, there were a large number of National Health Service doctors and nurses who were reservists with the Army Medical Corps who went out to Camp Bastion and learnt how to deal with traumatic blood loss. Those techniques have now been brought right forward to emergency ambulances across London now, so far fewer people are dying from knives or guns than might once have done. So that's a long answer, which ultimately sets up my platform to say, Kemi Badenoch is absolutely right. The police must do more stop and search. Now, there's a hard bit with that, and it's this, Ian. The actual people on the street don't want to do it anymore because it's too risky for them in terms of facing violence, allegations, complaints against them and so on. So it's far easier for them to go and have a cup of tea at the old people's home and get a nice letter written to their chief inspector by the matron of the old people's home about what a good community police officer they are. Stop and search, there's a no upside for that for patrolling officers, and I'm afraid it doesn't matter what Kemi Badenoch says, or indeed the Commissioner of the Met says, or you or I say, the cops are voting with their feet. The more they criticise, the less they're willing to be proactive and stop and search people. I'm actually, as a retired person, dependent on the police product, I'm quite alarmed at what I see now in terms of police commitment of discretionary goodwill.
I think one of the things we have to understand is, we have to go by the evidence, I think, on this. And I remember being very supportive of Theresa May when she introduced this new policy in 2014, because it was clear to me that there was, I think there was in some cases some deliberate discrimination. And I remember once going along the Victoria Embankment, and there was a police cordon, and they were stopping random cars. Well, it should have been random cars. It wasn't a knife crime search, but every single car that they stopped had somebody who was brown or black at the wheel. And I actually stopped my car because I'd seen this happening. And I asked the officer in charge, I said, can you tell me why every single car you're stopping has got a black or brown person in it? And he just shrugged his shoulders. And I thought, well, if that is typical of what's going on in London, no wonder there is problems between the black community and the police. But if you look at the statistics of the number of knife crime incidents in England and Wales since 2011 for each year. The moment the policy changed, the numbers increased. And not just increased a bit, within 3 or 4 years, they doubled. So, for example, in 2014, the year that the policy was changed, there were 25,000 knife crime incidents in the whole country. By 2020, that had gone up to 55,000. Now, you can't necessarily say, oh, well, that was only because of that, but it must have had some sort of role, I would say.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The point about stop and search is it is a deterrent to some carrying knives, because if people know they're going to be stopped, then they will perhaps think again. And I'll tell you again, and this is once again an evidential case, anecdotal. When I was running Hammersmith and Fulham, we ran a real strong zero tolerance policy towards all kinds of offending. And we had, during the time I was there, we did not have a single youth murder because of the approach we took to stop and search, which you might imagine was very vigorous. But we did have a member of our borough get themselves killed in Westminster. And the circumstances of it are that he had arranged for a school fight with another school in Notting Hill where they would meet in the booking hall at Victoria Tube Station. The net result of it was he was stabbed to death. He was a black youth, incidentally, and the people who stabbed him were black youths. But what was interesting is when we analysed their mobile phones, he actually said to his friends, don't go through Hammersmith Broadway. The feds are hot on stop and search there. Go on the bus. So, I can only quote, 15-year-old kid who got himself killed. It was certainly a deterrent to him carrying a knife through that area. I mean, bottom line on it is we might worry about vociferous actors like Fiona French or one or two of these people who've got themselves nice little jobs out of being activists. But when you talk to the black mums who are worried about their kids going to school on the bus in the morning or have indeed lost a member of their family, black mums have got a very different view to the people who make a living.
Let's test that out over the next 40 minutes, because I would love to hear from members of the black community, if I can use that phrase, particularly black mothers, to see what you think. 0345 6060 973. Kevin Hurley, thank you very much indeed for joining us. In a moment, we'll be talking to Dr. Victor Olisa, former Chief Superintendent in the Met. I think he might have a slightly different view from Kevin, and then we'll come to your calls. It's 17 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why do you need consultation? Who's going to say no?
Straight to the point.
Let's see.
Why let's see? This is what I don't understand.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Why won't they listen to the most successful living Labour Prime Minister? Arguably the most successful Labour Prime Minister of all time.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
Up to Speed, your Formula One podcast.
And then since then it's dropped to 247 and 224. So there's an undoubted increase. And if you want to put it in percentage terms, I suppose, 194 to 224. I mean, that is quite a big increase, 10-15%. Dr. Victor Olisa, former Chief Superintendent in the Metropolitan Police, who was the force's lead for stop and search and the force's former head of diversity, joins us now. What's your immediate reaction, Victor? Good evening to Kemi Badenoch's remarks today.
Good evening, Ian. My immediate reaction is trying to understand what it is that she's trying to do and what's the problem that she's trying to solve. I mean, talking about getting rid of all the work that's gone on through from the early stages of the Racial Relations Act becoming the Equalities Act, Macpherson reporting, and some of the recommendations being put in place, and some of the recommendations that she talks about that we should get rid of not being put in place consistently. So some of the recommendations around valuing cultural diversity.
No. I mean, we're talking about stop and search here specifically.
Yeah. And then clearly the stop and search bit in terms of recording stop and search, recording stop and account, so that not necessarily that the police will have the figures, but so they understand the number of people being stopped and how much stop and search and activities being used. Now, over time, I don't think there's any force now record stop and account, so we don't have an idea how many young men and women, how many young black men.
So what's the difference between stop and search and stop and account?
So stop and account, I'm a police officer, you're in the street, I come to you, Ian, and I say, somebody's just said that you may have kicked over a plant pot. I just need to talk to you, where have you been and where have you come from? That's stop and I record that details because I've spoken with you. Stop and search could be, I believe you kicked over a pot plant, you've just pulled out some plants and you've got it in your pocket. I'd like to have a look in your pocket, so I'm then searching you. So that's the difference. Now, the stop and account is just an encounter, but an encounter that's actually intrusive and questioning, and we record those because during the Macpherson inquiry, lots of evidence was given where young black boys are saying, we get stopped all the time by the cops. We get harassed, we get intimidated, but we don't get searched. And at the time, there was a notion of voluntary search where the cops are saying to, young people, turn your pockets out. You're doing it voluntarily. What's in your bag? Let's see what's in your bag. So police were saying, that's not stop and search. That's a voluntary show of the things that people had in their pockets and in their bags. And that was then, again, legislation was changed. You can't have a voluntary search. If you're searching someone, then you have to record it. That's the difference, and when we worked out the quantity, we worked out that there probably would be about 2/3 of all the stops would be stop and account, 1/3 would be stop and search, which is a natural thing because you want cops to be inquisitive, to ask what's going on, to talk to people, to try and get a sense of actually how you prevent something happening. You don't want them to search. But again, now stop and account is no longer recorded.
I mean, I'm very confused by this because the statistics I read out at the beginning saying in 2011, 112,000 stop and searches were carried out in England and Wales from 2010 to 2011 among black people. That figure had dropped to 22,000 by 2023, 2024. And then I read out the number of knife crime incidents, which the rise exactly mirrors the fall since 2014. And yet what you seem to be saying is, well, that doesn't really match.
Well, that's making a direct correlation that all the stops and searches that are done on people who are carrying knives. So you look at what police describe as a positive outcome, what's found in that stop and search. And if we're showing that the numbers are dropping, i.e. the positive accounts are dropping because the numbers stop and search are dropping, you can draw a correlation. Just because the numbers are going down and knife crime's going up, it's very difficult to draw that correlation because you're inferring that police are carrying out stop and search in the right places, they're finding weapons, and because they're carrying out less stop and search, consequently they're carrying out less weapons. I think you need to look at the numbers.
No, I think it's the direct opposite from that. Surely, the correlation is between the dramatic drop in stop and searches and then the dramatic rise in knife crime incidents and indeed in knife crime deaths over that period.
So what I'm saying is actually those stops and searches, if we're saying they're being used for looking for weapons. So if you look at the stop and search data, the vast majority is for drugs. Yeah, it's not for weapons.
Well, it doesn't. Surely, I mean, it doesn't really matter what it's for in a sense, does it? If you have this dramatic fall and then you have a dramatic rise in, I haven't got the drug offences figures here, but I suspect there would be a similar rise then. If you have a dramatic fall in the stop and searches, inevitably you're not going to find as many weapons, and then inevitably those weapons that you don't find are being used on people, which means that's why there's been a sharp rise in the actual knife crime incidents. I mean, to me, it's as clear as night and day that follows.
That looks very, very, very obvious. And I guess what I'm trying to say is actually where the taxes of stop and search are very different. So you get people who actually take the knife crime, for example. You've got people who are carrying knives who are secreting it, who are actually placing it in strategic places, who are then going off and actually using those knives. So when some of them get searched, there's no weapons found on them, but they go out and pick out those weapons and actually use them at a later day, closer to the scenes of the incident of the attack. Now, absolutely, it looks really straightforward that a huge drop in stop and search, a huge increase in knife crime, that's actually then taken into account that all those stops and searches are carried out for weapons at locations where they're weapons. That seems so obvious, but because stop and search are not done predominantly for weapons, the Section 60s, for example, which are actually intelligence carried out in areas where there likely to be evidence, then you can make that correlation fairly easily, because Section 60, looking for weapons, authorised, resources put into it, and you can make that correlation.
All right, Victor, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Victor Elisa, former Chief Superintendent in the Met. Right, let's go to Michael in Dulwich. Michael, good evening. What would you like to say?
Hi there. Good evening, Ian. So, yeah, I first felt when Kemi Badenoch sort of suggested this, I think it could be an interesting initiative. It could be an interesting initiative to obviously tackle this. However, I do think because there is institutional racism in the police force, I think this will prove to be really, really problematic, basically. If the police were impartial and how they approach things, then I think, instances, then I think that would be fair. But I just don't think it would be fair just based on who will be actually deploying and carrying out these acts, basically, in terms of arrests or stop and searches. And another point I wanted to add as well was about Kemi Badenoch. Yes, she is a woman of colour. I mean, I think you sort of said that from the outset. She is a black lady, but I think that she only chooses to be black or professes to be black when it suits her, basically. So I think that there are a lot of people in the black community that wouldn't agree with what she's basically saying.
Well, Kevin Hurley, you will have heard say earlier that in his view, the people that we should be taking most notice of here are the black mothers of children who have been stabbed to death. And I mean, listen, I've been doing this job long enough where I have talked to too many parents who have lost children, whether they're black, white or anything else, through knife crime. And it's one of the most horrible things, parts of the job, where you talk to people who've gone through absolute hell and there's nothing you can say to comfort them. And his view is it's those people that we should be listening to rather than people who understandably are wanting to have no discrimination within any police force.
Well, no, I mean, listen, I totally agree. I mean, in terms of the mothers, this is very close to home for them, and obviously they've been affected. All I'm basically saying to you is that, do you not think, though, just in terms of the inherent problems that we got in the police force, for them to do that, this is just going to increase further bias and further prejudices. Like I said, I'm not disagreeing. I think that this is an interesting initiative, but I just do think that there are a lot of widespread issues across the police force. And I think that's what I'm saying.
And I think they absolutely need to be addressed.
Yes.
But I mean, I've looked all of these figures up, and I mean, it cannot be coincidence that the number of knife crime incidents has literally doubled in the 10 years since Theresa May changed the policy on stop and search. It cannot be coincidence that the number of knife crime murders has gone up by around 20% since then. And what you have to do is say to all the families of the victims of these incidents, we realise that obviously your family's gone through terrible things, your child might have gone through terrible things, but we think that we're not going to do something that we know now through statistical evidence can actually save not just people's lives, but save people from being severely injured.
Yeah, no, I agree. But do you know what I think is very dangerous, though? What I think is very dangerous that we feel that Kemi Badenoch, just because she's a black lady, that gives her license to be able to talk about this freely. And if somebody else
does it not to a certain extent? Because she has a black, I think he's like 10 or 11 years old. So she has a son who's mixed race. Yeah. And I think it will be understandable if she fears that, and they live in southwest London, that she fears that he could become a victim of this kind of crime, because it is predominantly black youths who are the victims.
Yes, it is. I'm just trying to say we're playing a dangerous game when Kemi Badenoch basically just wants, because she is a woman of colour, that gives her jurisdiction, that gives her a license. I mean, I understand that she's got mixed. I know she's got, children, etc. as well. But I'm just trying to say this is a very, very dangerous.
Yeah, but do we say that about Ed Davey when he understandably talks very movingly about caring for his very disabled son? We think that gives him insight into the issue. Should we not give Kemi Badenoch the same license?
Yeah, okay. Well, I just think it's going to fuel further discrimination. That's all. That's what I think. I personally feel that if we go down this road, whilst it is a good initiative and whilst there is, that there is merit in this initiative, I do think it is going to open up the doors for some further discrimination, especially at a time when the police and some of these youth, some of these communities are at a. It's quite difficult. It's quite tense at the moment, basically.
Well, I'm not dismissing what you say at all. I think that is a danger. And as I said, I was all in favour of Theresa May doing it when she did it. I think what I'd like to hear is from policing professionals who can think of a way that this can be done without allegations of targeting and racial discrimination. There must be ways of doing that, and I'm sure in other countries they may have found that way, and we should learn a lot from what other countries do in this area. But Michael, great call. Thank you very much indeed. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment, and we'll also find out more about this terrible knife attack in Belfast last night. It's 7:32, news headlines on LBC with Matt Hewitt.
Politicians across Northern Ireland are calling for calm following what's been described as a vicious knife attack. A man in his 40s is being treated for injuries to the eyes, back and face, and a Sudanese national has been charged with attempted murder following the attack last night in Belfast. Donald Trump says Iran's shot down one of America's Apache helicopters as it patrolled the Strait of Hormuz. Both pilots are safe and uninjured, but the president says the United States must, of necessity, respond to the attack. Two men who threw a traffic cone and smoke grenade at police during disorder in Southampton following the murder of Henry Novak have been jailed. Both pleaded guilty to violent disorder. One also admitted possession of an offensive weapon after officers found a samurai sword in his Basingstoke bedroom when they came to arrest him. LBC weather, showers becoming less frequent into this evening, but sticking around in the west. Winds easing and turning chilly, lows of 4 to 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK,
members of the public intervening can see that the police, the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, can see that the police, the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, show up quite quickly afterwards and arrest him. So I think that the police are very keen to make sure that everything, they get this man before the courts very quickly as a way to try and calm, I suppose, some of the unrest.
Why is there unrest about this? Because I don't imagine this is the only knife incident that's taken place in Belfast this year. Why has this caused so much angst?
No, I mean, I reported on a knife incident, a very serious one, where 2 people were murdered in the very block of flats where this happened right beside about 5 years ago. I am sitting here speaking to you at a sort of interface area in North Belfast where there are masked youths currently blocking the road and taking cars away a couple of 100 yards from where I am. And the helicopter is above my head, which is a sound I'm very familiar with from my youth, from the conflict and the troubles here, but we don't often hear now. So what happens, and we've seen this before, we've seen it, in Ballymena last year and across Northern Ireland after that horrific attack in Southport a few years ago, is that there are elements online who will use events like this, really tragic and terribly horrific events like this, to mobilise people, bring people out onto the street, usually very young men. I mean, I'm sitting watching in my car and there's about 50 young men with masks and scarves around their face just beside, not too far from me, to bring them onto the street to cause chaos, because a lot of this is about getting numbers for what they see as their cause, and it's usually very effective in causing unrest and disorder. And what it does end up with is those young men end up with criminal records and a lifetime of problems as a result of this. And it does nothing, I suppose, to ease tensions, but they want to make every single knife attack about immigration. Every single attack about immigration that involves someone from outside of here. And that's why it was very important, I think, that the police came out, and the Chief Constable himself came out this morning and was very clear about everything that they knew about the suspect in this case, because in the absence of that kind of information, you get misinformation and disinformation. And then we've also seen accounts with millions of followers, Elon Musk, Tommy Robinson, tweeting about this attack today, and that, I suppose, all adds to the tensions on the streets.
I'm looking at pictures now of the scene there. Obviously, at the moment, it's light, and I suppose the fear is that later on this evening, people may incite violence, and presumably that's what the PSNI are afraid of.
Yeah, I mean, it can get very, very tense very quickly. And yeah, I am watching here because I think that there's going to be something that's going to happen right beside me. Yeah, the PSNI are out of numbers today. I mean, I was down this morning in court covering the Jeffrey Donaldson case, which is ongoing, and there's a lot of police around there. And as I was coming away, they said, we've all been told we have to work overtime. There's a chance there's going to be problems tonight, and there is a lot of police on the ground. It's really ironic because last night I was at a policing conference with the Chief Constable talking about confidence in policing, about new policing in a sort of post-peace process era, and about this, that it ended at 9 o'clock, and at 9:30 this attack happened, and this symbolises, I suppose, policing in a post-conflict era and the change in face of Northern Ireland and what policing might look like in the future, and how they deal with situations like this in order to keep them as calm as possible and stop this turning into the type of violence that can last 2-3 days, that will result in other people getting hurt, the businesses losing their properties or losing money, and homes being attacked. And that's, I suppose, the fear that tonight could turn into something really quite ugly as a result of those images and that horrible video from last night.
Can I just ask you briefly about the Jeffrey Donaldson case, because that seems to have got comparatively little coverage this side of the Irish Sea. I was listening to the Irish Times political podcast the other day, and they were talking about it, and I think it's big news on the island of Ireland. What's the latest from that case?
Yeah, so I was there today, and the prosecution have now closed their case. So the prosecution today, we heard the recorded video interviews of Jeffrey Donaldson and his wife Eleanor, who both, as you know, deny the charges they face. They were recorded in 2024 when they were first arrested. And when they finished playing those to the jury, there was a few police witnesses, and that concluded the prosecution case. Tomorrow there's a day, the jury have a day off, and there is some legal arguments in the absence of the jury. And then on Thursday, we expect the defence to open their case with Jeffrey Donaldson, the former MP for Lagan Valley, taken to the witness box to give evidence on his own behalf.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. That's Alison Morris there, crime correspondent and columnist for the Belfast Telegraph. Right, let's go back to your calls on Stop and Search, and I guess this relates in particularly to knife crime, but not exclusively. Kemi Badenoch wants to extend Stop and Search powers for the police, even though she realises that it probably will disproportionately affect black youths. Now, the argument goes that, well, it's actually the black youths that will be protected if Stop and Search is extended, because they tend to be the main victims of knife crime as well. Anne is a new caller in Watford. Welcome to LBC, Anne. What would you like to say?
Hello, Iain. I understand what she's trying to say, but I'm really defending not to do this because when you're stopping black youths, police are not just stopping black youths, they're stopping men in their 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s because they can't tell when people are driving their ages. So it's discriminative, it's discrimination on a massive scale because you're saying that all black men, whether they be youths or whatever, carry knives. This is absolutely incorrect. I know that most white families do not have the conversation with their black youths and their sons to say, when you get stopped by the police, just answer nicely, don't argue back, because otherwise they're disproportionately arrested and put in prison because you're arguing back. I've had that conversation with my son. I'm now 69 years old, and conversations. I work in a school. I still have those conversations with black youths because we are telling our black children, do not argue back. You white people don't have those conversations with their children. You know, we shouldn't have to be penalised because of the colour of their skin. I'm not saying that there are not issues within our black culture, but all cultures have different issues. And when you say that because of the colour of your skin, you should be stopped and searched, when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, and it's still carrying on to this day, of course you're going to get resentment within the black society.
I understand everything that you've said there, and I think if I was in your position, I'd probably be saying exactly the same thing. But the problem is that this is an area where you have to be so careful in talking about it and getting the right words, and I apologise in advance if I don't. But it is quite clear that the proportion of people who have been stopped carrying knives are black, disproportionately to the numbers of black people in British society.
Yeah, Ian, I'd have to disagree with you because if you're only stopping black youths, there's so many other crimes that are going on. So, of course, the proportion is going to go up because you're only stopping that minority. If you're stopping Sikhs, for the incident that happened the other day, if you were stopping all Jewish people because they were, I'm giving you an example here, they were thieves, which is not true, absolutely not true, but you cannot stop one minority group because of the amount of issues that are happening within that group, because you're saying that all of them, you're tarring them with all the same brush, that they are all carrying knives. My husband, my son, other people's children, they are not all bad children. They are the majority of them are fantastic. You know, they're getting degrees, they're going to school, they're becoming pillars of society. But if you always stop that group, how on earth are you going to stop that group from being resentful when they're in their 40s, when they're in their 50s, when they're in their 60s? They're never going to trust the police. And we know that the police will intentionally pick on them when there's other crimes that are taking place and they're not being stopped. There's drugs, there's big syndicates that are, raping women. We're not talking about any of that. And that goes on within other societies. We cannot target one...
I mean, Anastasia, who's a regular texter, and I've just seen a text that she says, statistics don't lie. And when stop and search powers were reduced, the number of knife crime incidents, the number of knife crime murders dramatically increased. Now, I suppose you could argue, well, that was just coincidence, but it's quite a difficult one to argue, isn't it?
No, Ian, as I said, I'm not disputing that fact, but because you're only targeting one community, what about the other crimes that take place where people are dying as well? You're not even touching the surface there. And we know there's loads of other awful crimes that go on. You know, I at 40 years old, I was stopped by the police. It was about 9 o'clock. And I work in a school. As I said, I'm a business manager. And the police stopped me. They said, oh, sorry, we're looking for men. And they waved me on. Now, how can that be right because of the colour of my skin? That It's absolutely abhorrent.
Well, believe it or not, I've been stopped and searched once in Whitehall, where I was carrying a suitcase, and they wanted to search my case, which I thought, well, fair enough, but this is obviously an area where if there's going to be a terror attack, it's likely to be here. So, but
Iain,
we all have our own experiences.
Can I just ask you a question? How old are you?
Now, I'm 63.
Right, and I'm 69. You just said you've been stopped once.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you ask a black man of 63, he's probably been stopped not once.
Absolutely.
Not 10, 11.
Yeah, and I've talked to many people
21.
about this.
Yeah.
I talked to an 18-year-old once who had been stopped 5 times.
Thank you, at 18. And because of the colour of his skin.
Yeah.
We can't change the colour of our
Well,
skin.
his conclusion was that it was the
doing well.
colour of his skin. Whether it was or wasn't, that was his conclusion. And therefore, he felt discriminated against. He felt targeted, understandably so.
Yeah, and you become resentful.
Yeah.
You know, I was born in England, in the UK, so I don't want our black youth. I want them to have the same opportunities as any other youth. I want them to stop the black on black crime. Absolutely, everybody wants that. But that by tripling the stop and search for only black boys, youths, men, whatever. How is that going to help the situation? Because then you have a generation that become resentful towards the police.
Well, I would like you to phone in more regularly, Anne, because you've set my switchboard alight, which is always good when you're a presenter. And you've made some really, really valid and interesting points. And we love callers like you. Thank you very much, Anne. It's 7:47.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
There is a continuing drumbeat questioning the value of university, as it would seem, unfortunately, another year students could be set to leave and find it very challenging on the job market. Is it worth it?
I have literally just finished university. I have sent close to 60 applications. I have not been given one interview.
I left school to become accountant, and I decided I didn't want to go to university because I didn't want to get myself in the debt.
I totally agree that students should have to borrow money and pay, but it's about the quality of the degree.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when 3 for $12.
Girl got shot, Olivia Prattel, hope I remember her name properly. I thought I was going to see the police stopping and searching all the Liverpool youths. So even though the crimes are happening, what we need is actually more diversity. Ironically, which everyone is against nowadays, but what you actually need in that situation with knife crime is more diversity in the policing. When local people police local communities, they get the job done without creating animosity between the police and the people they're policing. If you had brought people from Liverpool, from London, white people from London, to police Scousers, there's going to be animosity in between because there's a lot of cultural and understanding that's not going on properly there. You could see something and mispronounce what you're looking at. You could look at something and you don't understand what you're looking at because you're not from within the local community. But when local people police local people, you get better results, you get better information, you get better intelligence, and everything is done. We were on the track to that, but sadly, everyone is against diversity, and now we just want to turn the police back on the black boys and create the source laws and create all the ugliness of the ATUs and things like that.
I think it's a stretch to say that that's what Kemi Badenoch was suggesting here.
But she's suggesting inadvertently. She's right. There's
what you're talking about is the law of unintended consequences.
Yes, and we know diversity is the answer. It's worked. When the Hillsborough 97 happened, that was also police from outside coming in, and they lied against the people they were policing. Put local people, police local people, you get better results. Diversity is the answer, not the problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Koya. Let's go to Abraham in Taunton. Abraham, hi.
Hi. Hello, Iain. Thanks for taking my call. Just to add to what Anne said earlier, the thing about this is there's a public reaction to when an event like a crime, a knife crime happens, which is actually not the same. I'll give an instance. In April 2014, a 14-year-old black kid was stabbed to death by a sword-carrying man who was Brazilian Spanish, basically European. There was no outrage. Nigel Farage never made a statement. I tried to look out on the internet to see if he ever made a comment on that young boy's death. He never said anything about it. But when there was the Southport killing, there was real outrage because of the perceived identity of the killer. These are things that exist. We cannot pretend that they don't exist. They do exist. They live with us in the UK. And when we say we want to bring our policies, we have to take all of this into account. We cannot just bring our policy and just assume, because the statistics say, black people tend to carry more knives, so we should just subject it to black people and we should do more search and stop and search. It's going to have unintended consequences down the line. I think we should not have a more police state, but we should have a state that's able to prevent incidents from happening with intelligence before they happen. That's my take on the whole discussion.
Very interesting take, Abraham. Thank you very much indeed. Responding to Koye's point about the lack of diversity in the police, I've just looked up the number of ethnic minority members of the Metropolitan Police Force, so i.e. in Greater London. In 2011, it was about 8.7% of their officers came from diverse backgrounds. It is now 17.7%, so the percentages have more than doubled in, 14 years. And that sounds good, doesn't it? But when you look at the percentage of the population of London that is from non-white communities, it's far higher than 17.7%. But the figures are going in the right direction. Joseph is in Swindon. Hello, Joseph.
Hi, evening, Iain.
Hi.
Iain, I think I'm so disappointed in Kemi. Black men are carrying knives, not because they're more violent or not because it's a social issue. And policing alone cannot solve a social issue with the black community. And as a young man was telling you, when you have equality and diversity taking place and you see more black people in better position, you tend to have a change in society. As you said, Theresa May tried that before. She tried searching more black people, and that didn't solve the problem because as soon as they stopped, you were saying your statistics, knife crime went up again. So black men are carrying knives, as you know, because most young black men is involved in drugs or violence dealing that they cannot interact with the police in. And if you change that problem socially, you will solve the problem with black men, young black men carrying knives. So putting police to such black men more, being more harsh to black men on the street, doesn't really solve that problem. It doesn't solve that social issue. It doesn't make more moms not crying after the kids. It just makes it worse.
Joseph, thank you. I'm not commenting on the individual calls at the moment because we've only got a few minutes to go. So I just want to get as many people on as I can. The next one is Adam in Birmingham. Adam, hi.
Hi, Iain. My point is, so I listened to Kemi's speech today. So I agree with what she's saying in terms of her intentions, but I believe her speech today was quite reckless. The reality is that knife crime is high. And one of the reasons why it is so high is, I think political correctness in the police force has completely paralyzed it. The data does show that the racial disparities and the police leadership, in terms of the optics, they've become completely terrified of it. And the system is just too soft on crime, that almost to the point now where frontline officers are literally too scared to intervene, and they are second-guessing legitimate, stop and searches.
So what you're saying is she's diagnosed the problem but hasn't come up with the right solution.
Yeah, exactly. Her comment about when she said it doesn't make a difference how many black boys are searched, I think that sort of rhetoric, it's wrong because it sends completely the wrong message that young men will be targeted purely of the colour of their skin. Instead, what needs to happen is like an intelligence-led program where certain hotspots within the area where the knife crime is high, like certain inner cities, they should be targeted. And that way you can get the entire community behind you. But if you just say it blankly, it doesn't make a difference, who gets stopped and searched, then no one's actually going to come forward and help you, because the people that are willing to help, tomorrow they might be stopped and searched, and that will completely alienate you. So I think it needs to be targeted specifically and not just have a blanket approach.
Okay. Adam, I'm going to finish it there. I just want to squeeze in Jonathan in Moreton Forest. Jonathan, I'm afraid 45 seconds.
Yeah, it's just going to show how impossible it is to really police black people, because when you have the answer, it gets thrown back in your face. I mean, that woman you had on is in complete denial over the fact that most of the issues in inner London are by one particular racial group. That's it. It's just that's it. But we don't accept that. So we go around in circles and we get upset because we're being stopped and searched. Well, most of the funerals that take place last year were almost all exclusively black. All the funerals when it came to knife crime.
But you don't know that all of the perpetrators were.
Yes, we do. We do know, because where these things take place, it's always the same old hotspots where you find majority black population. We need to stop wasting time and speak the truth.
Okay, Jonathan, well, we could go further down that road, but I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we may get a question on that in Cross Question, which is about to start with Zoe Garbett, the newly elected Green Party Mayor of Hackney, Lord Redwood, John Redwood, Conservative peer and former Cabinet Minister, Mike Buckley, Director of the Independent Commission on UK-EU Relations, former advisor to the Labour Party, and Anna Van Praag, journalist and media executive. They're all here to answer your questions on any subject you like. 0345 6060 973. That's the number to call or WhatsApp. 84850 is the number to text. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, a 30-year-old man's been charged over last night's stabbing attack in North Belfast. The Sudanese national's accused of attempted murder, possessing a blade and making threats to kill. A man in his 40s is being treated for serious injuries. Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill is calling for calm.
My thoughts are very much with the injured man, his loved ones and everyone that's been affected. I urge people to allow the PSNI the space that they require to carry out a full and thorough investigation. The person who is responsible for this horrible crime must face the full force of the law.
Donald Trump's accused Iran of shooting down an American military helicopter patrolling the Strait of Hormuz. The US president says he'll respond out of necessity, despite earlier claiming the two countries are days away from making a peace deal. Two men have been jailed after the protest in Southampton over the murder of student Henry Novak. The pair have been given just over 3 years and 2 years, 8 months respectively for violent disorder. Kemi Badenoch says she wants a duty for public sector workers to consider people's age, race and disability in their work abolished. The Tory leader says it's making them scared of calling out wrongdoing in case they're branded racist. Diversity specialist Melanie Sharma-Barrows defending the duty.
There are 3 principles: eliminate discrimination, foster good relations, advance equality. These are good things for our society.
The government's expressed its wholehearted support for a national memorial paying tribute to Sir David Attenborough, although it's declined to pay for one. A petition to honour the 100-year-old naturalist has received around 90,000 signatures. An Italian astronaut will pilot a crew of 3 Americans for NASA's next Artemis mission.
I'm honoured by the role that I've been given. I'm also very humbled by the task in front of us.
Luca Parmitano will help test systems in Earth's orbit for a future moon landing. And Serena Williams has made a winning return to tennis 4 years after walking away from the sport. The 23-time Grand Slam champion is through to the quarter-finals of the women's doubles at Queen's after a straight sets win alongside Canadian Victoria Mboko. Williams has given a standing ovation as she made her way onto the court. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 145 points at 10,227. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, showers becoming less frequent into this evening, but sticking around in the west, winds easing and turning chilly with lows of 4 to 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. Welcome to Tuesday's Cross Question, isn't it? It's 8 on LBC. Now, let me introduce you to my panel. We have Zoe Garbett with us, Green Party Mayor of Hackney. Congratulations on your elevation, Madam Mayor. Next to her, I also need to congratulate John Redwood on his elevation to the peerage. He's a Conservative peer, former Cabinet Minister. To my right, not yet elevated to these grand roles, is Anna Van Praag, making her debut on the programme, journalist and media executive. And next to her is Mike Buckley, Director of the Independent Commission on UK-EU Relations, who's also former advisor to the Labour Party. So they're here to take your questions. You can phone on 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp on that number. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's start off with a question from Daniel in Catford. Is Kemi Badenoch right to say equality laws have gone too far, and also that police need to start doing lots more stops and searches? Well, I mean, if that is the case in the latter place, it will probably occur more in London than anywhere else. Zoe, do you welcome her comments?
No, in short, I think our equalities laws are really important. I think we have a really unequal society, and that's why we have the public sector equality duty. It's done things like make sure pregnant women don't get fired when they're on maternity leave. It's made sure that disabled people have access to the services they need. You know, I worked in the NHS to make sure that black and global majority people were able to access NHS services, and that's what they do, and it makes our society more equal. I've spoken to you before about stop and search. There was a recent study commissioned by the Mayor of London that showed that black people were more likely to be stopped and searched, 48 times more likely to be stopped and searched in affluent areas in London, which I think shows that we've got that very wrong. We know that it causes
the numbers,
harm.
though, since Theresa May changed the rules in 2014, the numbers have gone down in terms of searching black and ethnic minority people from 122,000 a year to 22,000. But knife crime has more than doubled, and the number of murders as a result of knife crime has gone up by 20 to 30%. So you put those statistics into the mix and think, well, has it really worked in terms of crime?
Yeah, and in that period, we've seen a huge reduction of funding to things that we know support young people and prevent violence. Things like our youth services have been cut by millions of pounds across the city. And, you know, due to government funding cuts, you know, we've seen young youth services be cut drastically. And we know that those are the spaces. I was at Young People's amazing voluntary sector group, Rise 365, on Saturday, spent time with young people. We know those spaces are so vital for young people to come together, to have mentorship, to kind of be in safe spaces, to talk about the things they're concerned about. And those are the things that, you know, when people don't have those things and they feel isolated, those are things where people get exploited and pulled into crime, which is, you know, that's the setting of that. The also what I'd say is that, stop and search. I was with the borough commander today. I met with the borough commander as my mayor of Hackney role, and she said that stop and search has gone down, but it's still disproportionate. So, you know, the police is known to be institutionally racist, misogynistic, ableist, homophobic. That was found by Casey in 2023. And in my role in the Assembly, I saw that that was still the case. You know, we had Charing Cross where people were disproportionately treated and harmed. So, yeah, I think that stop and search isn't the answer. We need to invest in preventative services to keep young people safe.
John Redwood.
Of course, Kemi is right that things have gone too far in a bad direction, as we've seen in this most recent tragic case where the young white man who'd been stabbed and was lying on the ground was thought to be the problem. and the assailant, who turned out to be the murderer because he'd made a false allegation of racism, was treated as the victim, and this was very damaging. Now, that's all going to be properly inquired into, and one can't comment on what the findings will be, but it has shocked the nation very badly. So what Kemi is saying is that we all have to be treated equally by the law and under the law, and police and the other authorities, when investigating crime, shouldn't start with any presumptions. They need to collect the evidence, look at the facts and the circumstances.
But do you accept that they have presumptions at the moment? And I mean, Zoe's figure of if you're black and you're 48 times more likely to be searched in London than if you're white. So there are automatic presumptions being made there, aren't there?
Well, there shouldn't be presumptions in either direction. And so that's exactly what Kemi is saying. The people you should stop and search are the people that the circumstances and evidence suggest are most likely to be carrying out crimes. And you should be completely colourblind and blind to the ethnicity.
But they're clearly not, are they?
No, they're not.
Well, if they're not, then they're wrong. And Kemi and I would say, no, this isn't how we want to be policed.
Yes, but she has said...
a lot has changed since the May changes.
But she said...
As you rightly said, Ian.
If she's Prime Minister and she increases stop and searches, she said, look, a lot of people are going to be uncomfortable with this because inevitably it means more black boys are going to be stopped and searched.
Yes, but she's not saying that they're going to be stopped because they're black boys. She's saying that potential criminals are more likely
to be stopped. No, but we know that, say, for example,
and you
drug
need to
policing,
look at
we know that people use drugs, all communities use drugs, yet black young people are stopped disproportionately 3-4 times more on a drug search than white young boys.
Yes,
it is disproportionate.
If that is true, that is wrong. It should be proportionate.
But if you do it more, it's going to be more wrong.
Well, you listen occasionally to something I've got to say. It should be proportionate to the outcomes. And so if you're going to monitor it by race and colour, then you should see whether you are disproportionately stopping one group or another relative to the number of criminals. But if a group are committing more of these crimes, they will get more stops and searches. But the crucial point is it shouldn't be a stop and search because of who they are. It should be a stop and search because of what the evidence and the circumstances suggest.
Mike Buckley.
I've been genuinely appalled over the last, week or 10 days since the murder of Henry Novak at how politicians, including Kemi Badenoch, have used specific instances like that appalling murder and like the attack in Belfast yesterday evening to justify their own preconceived ideas of the way that society ought to go with their own political agendas. I listened to Kemi's speech today and read some of the comments afterwards, and her definition of a problem, these things are happening because of our equality laws, I think is the wrong judgment, but also her solution it doesn't bear any scrutiny at all. Her solution is, essentially, we should all be nice. I mean, her solution is common sense. Well, what does that mean in the real world? If everybody had common sense, there would be no, or a particular definition of common sense, there would be no crime. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. We live in a world where the police have limited resources. They have to make judgments. They have to make calls. I do, broadly speaking, trust the police. I mean, there have been instances. I mean, obviously, there's been a problem with institutional racism and misogyny and homophobia. I do trust that is being worked on, but I also trust the vast majority of police in making the best decisions that they possibly can, just as they are in councils when they're making decisions on the allocation of resources. And these equality laws, they were put in place for good reason, because we live in a world where essentially the rich and powerful, and often the male and the white, are still prioritised over the needs of other people. And we don't want to live in that world, which is why we have these laws in place. To take them away would just welcome all of that back.
Anna.
But isn't Kemi saying that the problem is what went wrong with the Henry Nowak case, which, the police have admitted just as much, was because of these equality laws have gone too far. And now they're telling policemen, always put an ethnic minority person first. It's all got muddled. They're not colourblind in the law.
That doesn't mean that you take away the equality laws. It means you make them better, and it means that you train.
And we have better training.
Yes. Can't everyone just be equal in front of the law? Like, why does one race need to be protected? It almost feels racist.
In front of the law,
but we're not, are we?
Because individual human beings and indeed institutions have prejudices. We need to have systems and structures in place which combat those prejudices.
But I think we also need to have structures in place that make the general public feel that we don't live in a two-tier police state.
I don't think we
which I think, well, a lot of people do.
I know.
But when you say the general public, who do you mean?
Well, I think there's lots of people in Britain now feel that there's two-tier policing. Different races get treated differently under the law.
Well, as we've already discussed, black people are disproportionately stopped and searched. So in that sense, yes, there is. But it seems to me that it's in the direction that is the other way from what is being accused at the moment.
But that's not the perception, is it?
But the guidance that Hampshire Police and other police forces have issued does do what Anna says it does, and it says
it's quite clear.
It's a little bit like, I mean, it's an unfortunate parallel to draw, but it's a little bit like in the what was it called? Was it Operation Midland, when the police were determined to get celebrities banged up for sex crimes, and a lot of the inquiries turned out to be completely fatuous. And a policeman appeared in front of Ted Heath's house in Salisbury and said, "We will always believe the victim that comes forward," and which I thought at the time was a slightly odd thing to say, but it turned out to be a very evil thing to say, because a lot of the so-called victims were fantasists. And here you've got a situation where senior police officers are saying to their junior operational officers effectively the same thing. You need to give almost the benefit of the doubt to people if they are non-white, and that cannot surely be right, Mike.
That doesn't mean that you get rid of the equality laws. It means that you amend.
Well, you can replace them.
Exactly, you replace them.
And she hasn't said she's getting rid of them. She said she thinks the act is wrong and it needs to be replaced.
She wants it to be replaced with common sense. I mean, what does that mean?
No, she wants an equality law, but with this very important
obvious
modification that Iain has described.
I mean, we have lost common sense.
She did not set out a viable agenda for the future today. What she was talking about today was getting rid of the equality laws that we have and replacing them with everybody just making the best decision that they can.
Which is an
incredibly simplistic solution to a complex problem.
She said get rid of the inequality of treatment, because under some interpretation of the current equality law, you provide unequal treatment to people facing arrest in order to balance out other perceived inequalities. And Kemi is quite rightly saying everybody should be given the same treatment, and I've added that it must be based on the circumstances and the evidence.
But you're saying circumstances and evidence. In Stop and Search, for example, there was a report that came out last year by Dr. Shireen Daniels that said that Stop and Search is based on racialised behaviours. That's how they make the decision whether to make a stop and search, is as of the Metropolitan Police. So that's based on racialised behaviours. So how does that refer to the...
No, I'm not defending that. I'm saying it's got to be based on the probabilities.
But the problem is it's not.
You check it on a regular basis to see that if your ratio between the number of stops and searches and the number of people who are carrying inappropriate things is a sensible ratio, and you flex it depending on how that ratio works.
But we've been doing that for decades, and we've still got reports showing time and time again that black people are disproportionately treated. We've got young people disproportionately strip searched if they're black young children. Time and time again, black people in our communities are being disproportionately subjected to this sort of harm and surveillance.
Okay.
Well, I'm not in favour of that. So
we could talk about this for the whole of the hour, I think, but we're not going to. We'll come back in a moment. It's 8:15.
This is LBC. Here's a tale of two commuters. Steve was in a
Cabinet. I've launched my Who Owns Hackney review, which is looking at how we use our land and buildings and making sure that we can get as many of those into community use. That's like regenerating our high streets and getting our community halls back into use. We know that's a lot of the reason communities feel quite divided and people feel excluded is that they don't have access to space. I've made statements to, show solidarity with our trans residents in the, EHRC guidance. I've said something about the King's Speech needing to involve rent controls, and we're just getting under the hood and looking at all the details of the budget and seeing what we can deliver.
Have asked.
Lots. Been doing lots.
John Redwood, how long have you been in the House of Lords now?
Well, I was allowed in on February the 10th.
And how have you found it? Because it's a very different atmosphere to the Commons, isn't it? I mean, not just in the chamber, but more generally.
Well, it's a privilege. I'm very grateful to have been invited. I think it's a very difficult job if you try and do it well. I like the different tone. I think there's some good collaborative and cross-party working, and you can have grown-up conversations with people you don't agree with about things, and it doesn't all appear across the front page of the papers because you're not very interesting. So that's probably better. But it has all the frustrations of modern government written into it. And so as someone who wants my country to do better, I naturally find it really frustrating every day to see a government so struggling, sometimes wanting to do the right thing and not being able to do it, quite often, in my view, doing the wrong thing. And so, yes, it's a difficult job.
Right. Mike Buckley is Director of the Independent Commission on UK-EU Relations. I'm going to ask him about that after the next break. And Anna Van Praag, journalist and media executive, who tells me she's never really done radio before. So you're very welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
Right. Let's take a question. It's a WhatsApp question from Simone in Market Harborough. Is Elon Musk a threat to British democracy? Now, this evening, he's used his account on X to say that only Restore Britain can save Britain. It's the only way, when reposting a comment made by the Restore Britain leader Rupert Lowe about the Belfast knife attack suspect. We should also note that the anti-immigration protests on the streets of Belfast this evening have set fire to a bus. I was just watching that on my screen a few moments ago. So is Elon Musk a threat to British democracy? Mike Buckley.
I think to a degree he is a threat to British democracy, but I don't think he's a huge threat to British democracy. I think British democracy is perfectly able to stand up for itself against the likes of Elon Musk. And I'm very, very glad about that. But that is not to say that our democracy is not under threat and we should not be acting continually to protect it. And I would say that given the rise of Reform and given the rise of Restore, our democracy is probably under more threat now than it's been at any point in my lifetime.
Why is it under threat from Reform?
Because I don't think that the leadership of Reform or the leadership of Restore are in favour of a vibrant democracy that improves the lives of all citizens who live in the UK.
Well, they would clearly deny that. And they have a lot of
both
support.
of those parties want to remove significant proportions of the population from the UK.
They want to remove people who've come here illegally.
Restore wants to remove people who've come here legally as well.
But isn't that a debate that should be had? You can't just shut down a debate. That's kind of why we're in the state that we're in, because people on the left want to shut down people on the right.
But I would say that it's inconsistent with the views of the majority of our country, thank goodness. And I think Elon Musk is trying to.
Have you looked at the opinion polls lately?
Yeah, I have looked at there is nowhere near a majority for removing legally settled people in the UK.
I agree with you, but then you have to win that argument, don't you?
You do. Well, you can have the argument, but the thing is, those of us who believe in our democracy and believe in living in a country that we would recognise socially and morally need to be standing up for the values that we aspire to hold.
Anna.
Do I think Elon Musk is destroying our democracy?
A threat to our democracy?
I don't feel as hate-filled towards Elon Musk as other people. I think he's a complete genius, and I admire that. I think some of the things he says are quite prescient. I admired and was grateful to him for his intervention on X on the rape gangs. I think we needed that, and I think he did a lot of good. As to whether he likes...
In what way?
Because he
just inflamed a very horrible
awareness,
situation.
because governments have been trying to kick that under the ground for decades, and I don't think it should be kicked under the ground. I think we should deal with it, and I think constantly shining sunlight on it is a good thing. Those girls deserve justice. They shouldn't be ignored.
I don't disagree with that, but is it really for someone like Elon Musk to intervene in that debate?
Well, I think it's concerning that it had to be him. Every other politician was desperate to look the other way and always has been. And that's a matter of record.
Okay.
So do I think, whether he retweets Nigel or says Nigel isn't good enough anymore, or weak source or Rupert, I think he's just playing games, isn't he?
But he is influencing our democracy by the fact that he's clearly giving Rupert Lowe a disproportionate algorithm, if that's the expression, on X. I saw Rupert Lowe tweeted something fairly innocuous the other day, and it had 565,000 views.
Presence on X.
Now, it didn't have that because it was an incisive tweet. It was just because it was Rupert Lowe, and he'd fiddled the algorithms.
Oh, do you think?
Not Rupert Lowe. Elon Musk had fiddled the algorithm for him.
Maybe.
100%.
It's quite odd that he's obsessed with British politics in the way that he is, because he's not British. He doesn't live here. I mean, he is interfering in our democracy. There's nothing we can do about that.
Didn't he say his grandmother
There are
was a
regulations that we
servant
can put on
in
social
England?
media.
He has got English links.
He's not British.
I foresaw that it's going to take 4 minutes.
No, so you're giving away our secrets here, because my screens have just crashed in front of me.
There was a warning, and I was trying to get
So
your
I've got to wait 4 minutes.
It's going to come back.
No, but we've got a secret, because we have an auto cue in this studio. I don't use it, by the way, generally, but they're going to put the questions on the auto cue. Honestly, Zoe.
Sorry.
Anyway, you can answer the question now.
Sorry, I'm such a helper. I'm just like, things are going to change. Yeah, I think we could be doing more. Like, I think there are regulations that should be on social media, and I think Elon Musk is a threat because he represents someone with a huge amount of power from their wealth. And I think, we are a party that stands against wealth inequality, against people being able to make huge amounts of money and not, make their contributions. And I just think, like you've just described, the interventions into democracy, I think, is really worrying. Like, why is he interested in British politics? There's going to be a reason. And I think there's more we could do to regulate social media away from these algorithms that disproportionately inflame hate and division.
I've never understood, though, how a government can do that. A government can't intervene on an algorithm which is set by a privately run company. And they can ban the company, I suppose.
Yeah.
The government could, in theory, ban X from Britain.
Well, there's and I know other places have looked at, I completely avoid X now. I think it's really hateful. I just got so much hate during the Mayor of London campaign and didn't find it constructive at all. And every time I post on it, it's just completely... It's just not an effective or engaging tool. I came to it quite late in 2021. I hear that it had much more constructive time before that. But I do think we need to look at what the outcome is from using these platforms. And there's a discussion about young people and just how we regulate the way these algorithms work, or how people can put money into them, and the money behind some of the kind of advertising, or the way that they're used. I mean, I don't claim to be a tech expert, but there must be ways of pushing back against some of the very worst of it.
OK, John Redwood.
I think our democracy is a lot stronger than Mr. Musk tweets. And so I think he's ill-advised to do it. I think when you're a prominent person, and indeed a prominent person for a bit in politics as an advisor to the president, it's not a good idea to interfere in the politics of any country abroad, but certainly not of your democratic allied friends. And I don't presume to tell Americans how they should vote in America. That's for them to decide. And you deal with whoever the democratic choice of the people turns out to be with your allied countries. So I think it's pity he's done this. I remember it's not unique to Mr. Musk, because, of course, President Obama famously made what he hoped would be a decisive intervention in the referendum campaign on Europe when he told us we had to stay in. And I think that was terribly helpful to those of us who wanted to come out.
OK, right. Now I've got to put my glasses on too. This is going to test my autocue reading here, because I'm not used to doing it. So Andrew in Maidenhead is our next question. He says, first, Labour London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan blocks a £50 million police deal with Palantir because the company does not share London's values. Now the Labour government has confirmed the government is conducting a full review of Palantir's £330 million NHS contract, attacking its bosses as right-wing. The Palantir boss, Peter Thiel, had previously denigrated our beloved NHS. Does your panel agree that this is the ultimate expression of ideology over common sense? Surely our values should be based on reducing crime and improving health outcomes. I think Corey and Chris chose the longest question we've ever had that I could read out on the auto cue. Anna.
I actually do agree. I think people want crime to come down and our NHS to function properly. And if Palantir is a fantastically sophisticated system that will help us do that, then I've absolutely no problem with using it. I realise Palantir has become a sort of, clever word that left-wing people use about something they hate. Let's investigate it, fine. If I know they've been involved in surveillance and they've got some problematic elements, but pretty much every tech company has that would be able to do this. So I do think it's worrying that we're kicking the baby out with the bathwater on this.
And the fact that Wes Streeting signed some of these contracts, I'm sure, has nothing to do with it, Mike.
I don't know whether it has or not. I mean, I think that Palantir are very good at bringing together different data sets and allowing them to talk to each other, which is incredibly important in the police and it's important in the NHS. And I think that they probably are very, very good at what they do. But I think there are other companies that are just as good at what they do that did not have the same problems, whether you determine that to be, values or morals or how they behave. And there is also an issue, and they have been accused many times, of designing systems that are very hard for the customer to then get out of. And what we don't want to do is have our NHS data in particular, but also any police data in a company's system that then can't be extricated from that company's system. Essentially, so you switch provider. So given that there are those concerns, I think it's right that the government looks at this. But if they do decide this is the best company, at least for some period moving forward, to use, then they should do that.
John Redwood.
I don't think a government should get into deciding contracts on what the political views of the bosses are. It's against all the rules and it's quite stupid. I have to spend quite a lot of my time dealing with certainly people leading parts of the public sector and some of the private sector that I disagree with politically, but if they're doing a good job, that's what determines a relationship, and you just get on and have a sensible relationship with them. These ministers have got to be very careful because they are starting to override rules. For example, with the steel intervention, the civil service gave them very good advice that this was financially foolish and they should have at least secured the assets from the Chinese company before going ahead with the partial nationalisation. And they overruled and they issued a directive. I think they'll come to rue the day because that is going to be an extremely expensive mistake, making such a bodge of that partial takeover. And if they do the wrong thing on Palantir and they end up with a worse company on worse contract terms, that too is going to be against the rules and damaging the finances of the country.
Sorry?
So I worked in public sector procurement for 10 years and I'm now Mayor of Hackney, looking at our ethical use of funds. And I think you can care about improving health outcomes and reducing violence and keeping people safe whilst thinking about how you ethically use the money and funds that we have available and make sure that, and it is part of public procurement, you look at quality, you look at social value, you look at cost. And I think that's what people are doing here. And that's why the Mayor of London intervened. This is not in line with values. It's not a company that we should be commissioning because of their involvement in ICE in America and the genocide in Palestine. And I think having an ethical procurement system, we have in Hackney a sustainable ethical procurement strategy, and that is based on the values that are keep health outcomes as well as, being ethical in the way that we use our money.
I mean, slightly going off the subject here, but when you took over as Mayor of Hackney, it's only 6 or 7 weeks ago, but have you faced difficulties when you say to your officials, well, we're a new administration, we're going to do this? Oh, Mayor, that's quite difficult because we've always done it this way, and I wouldn't advise that you change that. Have you had much of that? I think Keir Starmer has.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing. This is the change in Hackney, the political shift in Hackney to the Green Party from Labour after generations of people, different kind of politics. Like, it's going to be a big change. It's going to be a big change for people. And I feel like we're in lots of ways, people are really up for it. We're having some really great conversations, being able to launch our Who Owns Hackney. But yeah, there are going to be times where, we are looking to say there are different ways of doing things and we act in a different way. There's ways that we are with each other. There's ways that we make decisions. We're very kind of consensus based. We're very democratic. We've got a different relationship to our national party than the previous administration. So that, yeah, there's ways that we're working differently. And I think.
But have you actually ever had to say to one of your senior officials, I hear what you say, we're doing it this way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that, not all the time. There's ways, like I said, I respect the expertise of the staff, but yeah, there are ways, we're going to be doing things differently, and there are moments where I've said, I take your advice, but I want to do it.
But would you override rules because you think the rules are silly?
No, I think we have to act. I've said to the staff, some things are going to be different, but the things that are going to be the same are being financially responsible. Being very aware and in line with our legal responsibilities, which includes the public sector equalities duty, and, leading in a really responsible way. But there are different ways, we are going to be looking to challenge and be loud about the things we do.
Well, I'm delighted to report that the screens are back.
I was going to report that.
It's 8:33. Let's get the news headlines from Katie Dartford.
Politicians in Belfast are calling for calm following a vicious knife attack in the city that's left a man with serious injuries. A Sudanese national who was granted leave to remain in the UK in 2023 has been charged with attempted murder. Donald Trump says Iran's shot down one of America's Apache helicopters as it patrolled the Strait of Hormuz. The president said both pilots are safe, but the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. And two men who threw a traffic cone and smoke grenade at police in Southampton last week have been jailed for a total of nearly 6 years. Both admitted violent disorder after teenage student Henry Novak was seen dying in police handcuffs. LBC weather, showers becoming less frequent into this evening, winds easing and turning chilly, lows of 4 to 9 degrees.
LBC.
A message from TfL.
I saw him in the
others in affected parts of society and the economy. What are the outcomes? Are the outcomes good? Are the outcomes bad? Are they in the middle? Has it not made much difference? And so we didn't want to come with a preconceived, we are Remainers, we are Leavers, we're happy with the Boris Johnson settlement, or we want to go back to the way things were. What we've discovered, of course, particularly, well, in every way, but we've talked to pretty much every sector of the economy, every business sector that's been affected in any way, and it's a catalogue of disaster. Some sectors, like financial services, have been, because they've got such wealth, have been able to respond to that fairly adequately and are relatively happy with where they've landed. But there are lots of other sectors, particularly those that are more geographically based, manufacturing, agriculture,
this is actually
more badly affected.
This is going to come up in our next question. Anna Van Praag is here, journalist and media executive who's worked for all sorts of different media organisations.
Yes,
a whole catalogue.
I've worked for the Mail on Sunday, the Telegraph, the Guardian, and then I did 10 years at the Standard, and I left 2 months ago.
And what do you wanted to do now?
Well, I'm freelance writing. I'm doing a bits here and there. I'm trying to work out what I do next. I'm a journalist through and through, so it would be very painful not to stay with what I've been doing for the last 25 years. But quite nice to have a break after an extremely challenging, exciting and fun, but really hard work 10 years.
OK. Right. Our next question is from Nikki in Kent. Given the mounting evidence that Brexit has been economically, politically and socially damaging, and that there appears to be no clear upside for the UK as a whole, what exactly was gained which justifies what it has cost us? Please don't cite blue passports, which were all made in the EU. John Redwood, do you want to kick us off?
Well, of course. I put it forward to a book called 75 Brexit Wins, and we've had that number despite the establishment trying to stop us using Brexit freedoms. And the biggest one is obviously the 17 billion we did indeed save, and where would Reeves find that money from today? And if we went back in, it would probably be 30 billion a year because their budgets have gone up a lot and we wouldn't get the rebate. So we're a lot better off financially. There was absolutely no hit to the economy. We've disproved this endlessly. The idiotic figures of 4%, 6% and 8% are all self-contradictory and they're all wrong. You look at the graphs of our performance compared with France, Germany, Spain, Italy, there is absolutely no sign of an extra Brexit hit when we had the COVID losses, and there's no sign of a smaller rebound afterwards. Indeed, we slightly outperformed some of the bigger continental economies over those periods. Why wasn't it more exciting? Well, because we didn't strip away so much of the damaging cost of all those EU regulations. And it took a little while to reorient our trade more, but trade has been a huge success because we've got the really big trade deal with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We got the Indian trade deal. We abated some of the worst of the Trump tariff problems that were cropping up, and we need to hold on to those. We don't want to wreck that relationship. We couldn't have done any of that outside that we've done outside if we'd still been in the EU. And this government is, of course, using Brexit freedoms all the time, often in ways I don't like, but they did the VAT on school fees. They couldn't have done that if they'd been in the EU still. They've done big subsidies to the steel industry and steel tariffs. Again, not terribly wise policy, but they think it's the right thing to do, and none of that would have been possible in the EU. Isn't it great that we can now take steps and have good arguments here about whether they're the right policies or not? These other people, they don't like democracy, and then the Remain side always lied about the economy and trade, and the figures show that they were wrong.
And in the blue corner, Mike Buckley.
I genuinely, I don't want to be rude, but I just find it shocking that 10 years on, knowing everything that we know, with all the economic assessments that have been done by the government, by independent economists, by businesses themselves. For example, all the work I've been doing, in my little corner for 4.5 years, talking to businesses across the land, all of who have told me about the increased costs, the reduced ability to trade. Effectively what we did with Brexit was we put sanctions on our own economy. The sanctions we put on Russia to stop them trading, to put deep harm into their economy so they will stop invading Ukraine. We put sanctions on our own economy. And the results of that were inevitably bad for everybody. And that's been bad for everybody listening to this programme and for our economy as a whole. The assessment's now of 6 to 8%, and the 40 billion a year hit to the exchequer every year, which is about the same as the tax that Rachel Reeves has had to put on individuals and onto businesses as well since Labour came into power. All of these are the consequences. And to sit there now and say, oh yes, it's all fine, this is all being made up, it's just farcical.
Well, you just made all those figures up with the OBR and the study.
Make any of those figures up.
The 8% study said that if we performed as well as America, we'd be 8% better off. Exactly right. But it didn't go on to say that they didn't include France and Germany in the comparison, because we beat France and Germany.
The comparison
what that study shows is that we should have done more separation from the EU.
The comparison is with a hypothetical UK that stayed in the European Union. That's what the work those economists have done, and other economists as well. But even when you take
surely
away the
France
work
and
of
Germany should have been doing much better. Under your thesis, if France and Germany were doing so much better, then you would have a stronger argument, surely.
The European economy has its own problems. No
exactly.
question. But we're talking about the British economy and how the British economy would have behaved over the last 10 years had we not left the EU. There are two reasons for this. One is the trade barriers that we put on our own economy, which no other nation has done in history, by the way.
Which trade barriers? We cut tariffs off our trade. We took 24%
It's not all about tariffs, though, is it? But it's also the economic uncertainty. As soon as we voted to leave in the referendum, inward investment into this country just fell off a cliff. And it's never really come back.
That is true.
When I talk to business leaders in the EU, or trade associations in the EU, or politicians in the EU, they all say, lots of the business leaders say, look, we would love to invest in the UK economy again, but you're going nowhere until you rejoin the EU. So we're going to invest somewhere else with a more dynamic economy, and crucially with fewer trade barriers with their greatest trading bloc.
Sorry.
Well,
no, go on.
Well, of course,
it's really interesting.
Of course, the mighty digital investments, which are the really big thing that are going on at the moment. It's all about America and digital. Of course, they're going to Ireland rather than to United Kingdom, because Ireland charges a so much lower corporation tax
rate. And crucially, they have access to the single market. If we cut our
corporation tax rate, which we're now free to do, we would attract an awful lot of that, and we'd be so much better off.
That's a great example. If you look at those big tech companies, a lot of them moved so many of their staff and so much of their investment and activity away from them.
Many of them are now coming back
because of the tax rate.
Yeah, and I think we need to.
No, because they
were doing it before we left.
Because they're in the single market.
No, nothing to do with that. It's because they don't want to pay more tax, and I don't blame them.
But they're within the jurisdiction of 450 million people, as compared to 7 or 80 million people in the UK. It's just economies of scale.
But we have a free trade agreement with the EU. We don't pay any tariffs into the EU.
We've got a great free trade agreement, but that still puts up barriers for services trade, including digital, but also for manufacturing.
And if you look at what's really happening, we've got record levels of youth unemployment, and people really struggling here in the UK. And it's just and you said we're better off financially, but I don't feel like that's how many people feel. It's not how people in Hackney.
Yes.
Okay, that's not how people in Hackney feel.
The side of the bus didn't lie. We got that money back.
Mike, how do you account for the fact that JP Morgan, who were one of the big banks who wanted us to remain, they shipped off a lot of their staff out of the City of London to Paris, I think shortly after the referendum, and they're now all coming back?
I'm not sure they're all coming back. I mean, what seems to have happened in financial services, to be honest, of all the sectors I've spoken to, financial services is the one sector that says, yeah, we took a big hit. Yes, it cost us millions and millions. We've adjusted and we are now selling into Europe and we're selling into other parts of the world. And one of the things that actually lots of businesses say is, well, look, we want stability. And the ongoing conversation about our relationship with the EU for all business sectors just introduces
All right, let's
stability.
bring
But financial services, essentially, the City of London is pretty good. But again, like every other sector, it would have been in such a better position had we remained.
Okay, Anna.
Well, isn't all the incredible AI activity something that we wouldn't have got had we not left Europe? You know, all the incredible investment into London. I mean, I'm extremely excited about that. I've read in countless places that we wouldn't have had that had we still been in the EU.
Yeah, we're number 3 because we've allowed more innovation. The EU has absolutely crippled their digital industry with laws since we left, which we haven't adopted, thank heavens.
Data centres are causing a huge issue in London.
I completely agree. Data centres are far more complex issue. But in terms of just all these big AI businesses and funding, and that feels really good.
There may be an element of truth to that, but even if that is true, it's a tiny investment as compared to our gargantuan loss over the last 10 years.
I'm not questioning that we had a big loss. I'm not questioning it became very messy. But I do think if we can get to ourselves in a situation where we're in the front of AI for Europe, as unfortunately we are for data centres, which is not something we want, then, you know, the AI stuff could be immensely valuable at getting some of these young people jobs. And
okay, well, that was a feisty argument there, wasn't it? We enjoyed that. It's 8:46.
LBC.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when the stand
could reduce rents by thousands of pounds. I only know about this because it came up on my Instagram reels, so my algorithm must be very perverted at the moment.
He's got a big reach, Dylan.
Right, well, we'll come to you last on this because I want to hear what other panellists think first. Anna.
Well, and I like you enormously, Zoe, so I hope you don't think I'm disagreeing with you on everything. I just think we're not aligned politically. I found it, before those new laws came in a few months ago, so many of my friends were kicked out of their rented accommodation because the landlords have sold everything. So our neighbour, for example, who's got 5 flats, he's just sold them all because he doesn't want to have someone he can't get rid of sitting in them. So I think the problem is that all of this stuff has horrible unintended consequences. Why would I bother to buy a flat and put myself at financial risk to rent it out to someone if I can't make any money out of it? It just doesn't make any sense.
But he thinks it's unethical to make money out of housing.
But
he thinks landlords should never make a profit out of having a house.
Why would you risk your own money and get into debt to buy a flat that can go into negative equity and leave you completely in an awful death spiral if there's no possible upside? I just don't think that's understanding how the world works.
Mike?
I think we need to go back to first principles, really. Everybody needs somewhere safe and secure to live. Some people could afford to buy somewhere. It would be lovely if everyone could afford to buy somewhere. Not everybody can. People who can't should have access to safe, secure council accommodation or social housing that is affordable, that is safe, that isn't mouldy, that isn't in a crime-ridden estate, all of those things. And I'm very glad that we are beginning to start building council housing again. And I'm very glad that it's now more difficult to buy something under right to buy. In my view, we should get rid of right to buy. In the middle, there's the private rented sector. And we need to decide what that is, how big it ought to be, and how it ought to run. I mean, we seem to be in this odd space where we can't decide if it's a business, and we should treat these people as business owners who can therefore make a profit, or whether it's kind of a private hobby. And at the moment, we tax people as if it's a private endeavour, as if it's income tax. We price them as if it's income, the same way as running a job. But we regulate them as if they're a business. And we're in this odd no man's land, I think. But we need to decide where we're going, because otherwise, landlords will keep leaving the sector, and that isn't great if you're a renter.
John?
Well, it's very sad the way left-wing, well-intentioned politicians mislead young people and others who need to rent houses. Everywhere that has tried rent controls or eliminating the landlord profit have the same collapse in supply of housing, and then the rents are forced up by other ways. There have to be ways round so that the rents do rise because the market can't balance, and we're witnessing it again with these Labour efforts today. As Anna has described, we're losing too many houses. I think it is tragic that houses are so dear, and they've been driven there by successive governments this century, by the combination of inviting in hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who need housing without building enough to accommodate them, and without having enough addition to the stock to deal with the settled population as well as the very large migrant numbers. And so you've got to operate on both the demand and the supply side. The government is now using changes to migration law introduced belatedly by Mr. Sunak to get the numbers coming in down. That would take some of the pressure off. You do need to stop the big increase in demand all the time. You're so short of houses. It's very mean to invite people in when they can't afford a house when they get here. And you've got to do something on the construction side. And the last government set a target of 1 million over 5 years, and they hit it. This government set a more ambitious target of 1.5 million over 5 years. Great target. I don't think they're anywhere near it, and they need to make a lot of changes to their economic and housing policy, which we haven't got time to debate tonight, in order to try and hit that target, because we do need that sort of target level to be fair to those young people who can't get housing.
Zoe, when you heard your deputy's comments, what did you call him in for an interview without coffee? So this is not helpful, Dylan.
No, it's very helpful. I think the fact that we're talking about this means that it's helpful. He's really pushing the debate, and this is what, he's been doing every day since I met him over a year ago. He's brilliant, and I love having him in my cabinet. I think this speaks to a very broken housing system. The government transferred £70 billion to private landlords through housing benefit and housing support in a 5-year period. That's £70 billion to help people pay their private rents because they're so high. And this is about helping renters and addressing the inequality in the system. My dad grew up in council housing in the 60s, and his parents were able to buy a home. So they missed out on going to the private rented sector because they were able to save up money and to, be in, sufficient supply of council housing, and then they were able to move into their own property. And I think that's the housing system that we need to try to get back to. And we do that by getting rent controls, putting more funding into building homes, because you said there's a target, but the target is just a number. It's not, and this is what I was critiquing the Mayor of London on when I was in the Assembly. It doesn't have targets based on tenure or on accessible housing. We know disabled Londoners are really missing out on the homes that they need. So this is speaking to the very heart of people making profit from our housing system and going back to first principles about getting people a
But do you genuinely agree with him that no landlord should be able to make a profit?
I think we need to look at who's benefiting from our housing system.
But then you would have no landlords.
And he's saying about making thousands and thousands of pounds off their homes, which I don't agree with. I don't think people should make extortionate profit.
But if you drive landlords out of the market, you don't have homes that people can rent.
This is where I think you need to look at it in the rounds. That if you're bringing people's rent down, they've got more money. The government have got more money. £70 billion to build council homes. If we stop right to buy, the homes leaking out of the other end. If we address how developers are able to build the homes that they want and make, Berkeley Homes made £500 million profit in a year and then claimed that they couldn't make affordable homes. So it's talking to the very heart of the system. It's saying that let's question why people are able to make so much profit out of private rent, and how people are still really struggling, and how, London saw a 23% increase in homelessness in the last couple of years. So, the whole system is broken, and we need to address
But public sector housing couldn't take over the massive supply that private landlords currently supply. Because it would bankrupt the state. And so you do have to accept there's got to be some profit motive in this third sector for renting in order to have some supply. Otherwise, you're being very cruel to the people who need housing.
But I think we need to acknowledge two tragedies, or two disasters in our housing policy, one of which is right to buy, which should never have been brought in my view, because it took away large swathes of that available housing stock, which provided safe, secure, lifelong housing for people that was affordable.
The same people
and
lived
Mrs.
in
Thatcher
it after the sale
deliberately sought to destroy that, and indeed, largely has destroyed it. And we need to turn that around and go back to council properties again that are there on lifelong tenure. And that's incredibly important.
Okay,
and
right.
a massive rise in housing price.
We've just got time for one more question, which will require brief answers. Rita in Queensbury says, a mother and baby were told to leave a performance starring Sir Kenneth Branagh at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-upon-Avon. Why is this country so anti-country? And I don't understand what that means. Why is this country so presumably that means children, and anti-family. And we're going to be taking your calls on this after 9 o'clock. Anna?
I'm torn because theatre tickets are so expensive now. You can pay £200, £300 for a ticket. So obviously somebody else's baby screaming for the whole thing is undesirable. But I do think having babies everywhere is really lovely. And I don't really like the idea of just putting them all in nurseries all the time so women can go to work and go to the theatre. Doesn't feel very progressive.
Why on earth would anyone take a baby to a theatre performance?
Because if they're tiny,
Ludicrous.
maybe they want to be with their mother. I agree with you, but I also do think we should be more inclusive of babies in general. I think children are wonderful, babies are wonderful.
Not
we
in
don't need to
theatres
hide
or
them away.
cinemas, they're not.
No, fair.
Mike?
If it's a family showing at the cinema, crack on, take your kids.
Take your kids, but not a 2-month-old baby.
A baby may not. Well, a family showing, I think that's fine.
No.
But a baby at a theatre performance.
You can tell what angle I'm going to take in the next hour.
They're allowed to come in.
But more broadly, I do think that we have a problem with babies and children in our culture and young people.
We need more of them around.
There have been so many international comparison reports put out by the UN and others saying that Britain is now a pretty shoddy place to grow up as compared to our peer countries.
Oh, what a load of old...
Well, you see, this is the response.
I'm sorry, this is a great country. Why is it that so many people just want to do down our country all the time?
By our children and young people. And you've got an independent assessor looking at what it's like to grow up in Germany, France, Poland, the UK. But don't pretend that this country isn't a great country to grow up in. The UK. I'm very glad I grew up here. It's been a great place to grow up. But I think we can do better for our young people. And instead of saying, but just poo-pooing that, we should say, well, how have they come to this conclusion? What can we do to do an even better job than we do right now?
John Redwood.
I don't want to go lecturing people on what they do with their babies. I hope the parents look. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm a freedom-loving boy. But I would say to the parents...
if you were in that theatre, you would be the first to demand that mother removed her baby.
How do you know? I don't think I'm behaved like that at all.
I think you would.
But I think the parents would be wise to understand the baby isn't going to get a lot out of the theatre treat.
No. Zoe?
I think I'm on this side of the table with it being. I do think we need to do a lot more for children and young people. I think that we should talk to them. I don't know if you ever have. I know you're going to have Dylan on, which would be great. We should speak to young people about how we can make things more inclusive. But we need to be also respectful of the environment.
Right. I'm looking forward to the next hour. Right, our fun question comes from Christina in East Horsley in Surrey. NASA have named the crew who'll be on its next mission to fly vaguely near to the moon. If you had to spend 9 or 10 days trapped in a space rocket with another member of the panel, who would you want to be in the rocket with you? Mike?
Well, I'm going to go with the permission with the Mayor of Hackney, because I think I'd be really interested to talk about the future of Hackney as a former resident of Hackney, and indeed the differences and commonalities between Labour politics and Green politics.
Zoe?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I'm not going to go for you, unfortunately, Ian, because the way you handled the tech was a bit stressful, and I think you'd be a bit of a worry in the space rocket. So, I'm going to go for Mike. The team are nodding.
No loyalty there. Anna.
Right, I shall go for John Redwood in that case. In
what way?
I'm sure I can learn a lot from him with his incredible career across the Commons and all his businesses.
John?
Well, I'd return the compliment. I think I'd have less hassle from Anna than from the other two.
Can you imagine? God, you'd want it all to be filmed and recorded, wouldn't you? Thank you all very much indeed. Really enjoyable episode of Cross Question tonight. On tomorrow's panel, we have MPs Dawn Butler from Labour and Caroline Voden from the Lib Dems, the Conservative peer and new director of the Institute of Economic Affairs think tank, Lord Daniel Hannan, plus the former Police and Crime Commissioner Festus Akinbusoy. I'd have to learn how to pronounce that. Akinbusoy, I think, is the right pronunciation. He will correct me tomorrow, no doubt. So, brace yourselves. Kenneth Branagh was none too pleased at a performance at the Royal Shakespeare Company after an attendee complained about noise coming from a baby. So the question I have for you, have you ever experienced this, first of all, where your whole enjoyment of a theatre or cinematic performance was destroyed by a shrieking child? But isn't it just unfair on other people to take very young children to places which are meant to be quiet, such as theatres and cinemas? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, politicians are appealing for calm following last night's knife attack in North Belfast. A 30-year-old Sudanese national has been charged with attempted murder and making threats to kill. A man in his 40s is being treated for serious injuries. As crowds gather in the city tonight, protesters have set fire to a bus. Northern Ireland's Chief Constable John Bouchers made this appeal.
I understand that last night's attempted murder will leave people feeling enraged with emotions from fear to anger. But please, let the police do their job, unfettered and undistracted by wider concerns there may be about disorder.
Donald Trump says the US must respond after Iran shot down an American Apache helicopter that was patrolling the Strait of Hormuz. He said the two pilots involved are both safe and uninjured. Military analyst Sean Bell says Washington was waiting to see if they were okay before saying Iran was behind the attack.
I think what's most interesting, though, about this is that they wouldn't have just gone out and collected these guys, because if you do that, it shows the Iranians where you're looking. So there'll undoubtedly be a series of deception operations going on around the place, and it might well have been they just sent one of these little boats out while something else was going on to get these crew out.
2 men have been jailed following last week's protest in Southampton over the murder of student Henry Novak. They've been given sentences of just under and just over 3 years for offences including violent disorder. Parents who care for their seriously ill child could soon get better job protections under new government proposals. Ministers have opened a consultation on helping carers in Great Britain back into work. And 3 Americans and 1 Italian have been announced for NASA's Artemis 3 mission in a year's time. They'll launch aboard the Orion spaceship and test commercial landers that will hopefully take people to the moon on future missions. Dr. Matt Bothwell is an astronomer and author based at the University of Cambridge. He told LBC the ambition is high.
The objective of the Artemis program is to be a stepping stone to the exploration of the solar system, really. The Apollo program, the aim was to get to the moon. With Artemis, the aim is to get to the moon and then Mars and even beyond, maybe.
In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 145 points at 10,227. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, showers becoming less frequent into this evening, but sticking around in the west. Winds easing and turning chilly, lows of 4 to 9 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Katie Dartford.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
4 minutes past 9 is the time on LBC. It's Iain Dale with you until 10. Imagine you are a famous actor on stage and There are lots of things that can annoy people on stage. First of all, it's if phones go off in the middle of a performance. Second of all, it's when people get their phone out to see what their latest WhatsApp messages are, because the people on stage can often see the screens. And it distracts you. I'm not saying this, actually I have done a bit of acting, but let's not go there because it wasn't very successful. I can imagine that would be very, very annoying. But even more annoying than that, I think, is if there's a baby that every few minutes starts crying. Now, can I make clear right from the start, I have nothing against babies, even though my nieces used to call me Uncle Herod. I do not want to hear babies in a theatre or a cinema, or indeed at a concert. Okay, you might say, well, there's lots of noise at a concert, so why would you notice a baby? Well, if you're sitting anywhere near the baby, you probably would, wouldn't you? Well, a baby was kicked out of a performance of Shakespeare's The Tempest, starring Sir Kenneth Branagh. Audience members demanded refunds after the infant disrupted the first hour of the play at the Royal Shakespeare Company's theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon. At the interval, the theatre told the mother of the baby to watch the rest of the play on televised screens in the adjoining cafe. Charles Morgan said the infant was awoken by the storm which opens the play that centres on magic and shipwrecks on a remote island. Thank goodness there was never any actual screaming or crying, but it was gurgling and cooing and chirping very loudly throughout, she told the Daily Mail. Of course she did. It never let up. They were sitting in the highest tier, the second circle. But it's a very compact theatre, so everyone in the room could hear it, no doubt including Sir Kenneth and the rest of the cast. Well, the baby's interruptions never stopped, and by the end, people were audibly tutting. Very British thing to do, to tut, isn't it? And turning around to show their displeasure. During the interval, attendees complained to ticket sellers and the ushers to demand refunds if the baby was allowed in for the second act. But the mother was completely unapologetic, according to Miss Morgan. I heard her saying, "She's only a baby and she'll probably fall asleep soon anyway." Well, it did seem extraordinary, said Miss Morgan, extraordinarily entitled, to be honest, a weird arrogance when it was plain that she had massively overstepped the mark. Finally, some very stressed manager types did gently insist that it wasn't fair on other audience members for them to return for the second part, but she could watch it from the cafe on TV monitors. Another audience member said the baby had completely ruined the first hour. No one wanted to be mean to a young mother, but it was simply extraordinary that she seemed unable to read the room and to take the baby outside when it began began being noisy. I was in a party of 4 and had paid something like £400 for our tickets and made a 6-hour round trip to be here at something we had looked forward to for months, and this completely ruined it. Now, Lord Blunkett, the former Home Secretary, was reportedly in the audience and quipped as he left the theatre. I said to the person sitting next to me, "I'm very tolerant, but I'm not sure if the baby's getting anything out of this." You see, that's the point, isn't it? Now, look, I get it. If you are maybe a single mother and you've got no one to look after a baby and you want to see a theatre performance, maybe the only way to go is with your child. But if the baby starts either crying or gurgling or cooing or whatever it was the child did, wouldn't you automatically get up and leave? Because you would understand that fellow theatre-goers were not going to be enjoying it if they could hear what the baby was doing. It's a bit like babies in church, at weddings, or even worse, funerals, where the vicar is about to deliver his serious sermon, or her serious sermon, of course we have to say nowadays, and suddenly it's interrupted by a baby crying. And I mean, it's awful at weddings when the vows are being taken. I do, and then a baby starts screaming. And it's embarrassing, isn't it? Have you been the parent in that role where your baby has suddenly disgraced your family, to coin a phrase? And maybe you've been there with your husband or your wife and the baby started crying and you then disagree over whether one of you should take the baby out of the building. then it gets even worse because everyone around you can hear the row that you're having about who should take the baby out or if they should go out at all. So whose side are you on here, the mothers or the fellow theatre goers or the theatre managers? I mean, personally, I don't think any baby should be going to a serious theatre performance. I don't think any baby should be going to the cinema. And I don't really care what kind of film it is, even if it's a children's film. How can you enjoy it if you've got a screaming child in the seat next to you? You can't, can you? 0345 6060 973. Well, let's talk to the journalist and author Liat Hughes-Joshi, who writes about parenting and family life. Liat, are you about to come through the screen and want to hit me for what I've said?
No, quite the opposite.
Oh, right.
Actually.
Excellent.
I think I feel even more strongly than you by the sound of it.
I don't think that's possible.
Are you sure? Look, there is no good reason why a baby needs to be at an expensive theatre production. I
don't care if it's a cheap one. If it's the local village hall where you've paid for £5 to go and see the pantomime.
That's a very good point, because it's not fair on the performers either. No. It's not fair on the audience. So look, as a parent, when you have a baby, you have surely got to accept that there are going to be some compromises. And for a few years, and it goes quickly, mostly, there may be things that you can't go to if you don't have a babysitter or you don't have family nearby. And I think that going to the theatre is one of them. And I think this woman was actually very, as one of the people quoted in the Daily Mail piece said, she was rather entitled and I think very selfish, because even if she believes that her baby's going to sleep through the whole thing, come on, babies wake up, don't they? They wake up at the time you most want them to sleep. And it's just pretty ridiculous to think that this little baby was going to sleep through the whole performance. You said in the intro, if the baby woke up, then, whisk him or her out. But actually, even that's going to disrupt the other audience, the other audience members, because, people next to her are probably going to have to stand up and let her through. So I just think, there's a time and a place for babies and little children to attend theatre performances, perhaps that are very, very family friendly. And there are those out there. Maybe not Shakespeare necessarily, but there are child-friendly performances, and this wasn't one of them, and it was very, very selfish.
I wonder if there have been any theatres or cinemas who actually put on performances directed at young parents, so they can take their children, their young children. Yeah. I mean, I don't. It's difficult to say. Well, there should be an age limit of X, because I don't think there's any age limit. Well, any child, I'd say, under the age of 9 or 10, I mean, they're not going to get The Tempest, are they, frankly? So what's the point in taking them?
I'm not sure I quite get it.
No, I don't think
I'm
I would
into my 50s. Look, there are cinema performances, particularly for parents and babies. They're quite popular. I think they're a great idea, because if someone cries, be that parent or child during the performance, it's pretty accepted. You know what you're getting into. You've bought your ticket knowing there are going to be other parents and babies there. So I think that's a great idea. But look, I mean, generally, I think we've got this thing going on in society where we've got kind of child creep. What I mean by that is we seem to be increasingly expecting everywhere to be child friendly and everything to be child friendly. And actually, even if you're a parent, there are times when you want to go out without your own kids and you don't want to be around other people's children. And I think we should accept that and stop making those of us who would like child-free spaces into the baddies, into the Grinches.
I think there's also, I've just thought of another problem where fathers are so keen to take their little boys to their first football match, and they take them probably about 3 years before they should. Yeah. And the child may be sort of excited at going, but as soon as they get there, they're not watching the game, they're sort of fiddling on their phones. And so all the people around them, instead of watching the game, are looking at the child thinking, what's that child doing now? And I completely get it. I mean, if I had a son, that would be a real moment to take your son to his first football match. Yeah. But possibly fathers need a little... it's not just, I suppose I should say mothers too, because mothers do like football. I get that. But it's predominantly fathers, I think. And maybe they need a bit of your parenting advice on that sort of thing.
Try and get your timing right. Try and, it is quite hard to know whether, your 6-year-old is suddenly going to get to the stadium and be utterly enamored, or they're going to sit there fidgeting and bored and going, actually, Mummy or Daddy, I'd like to go home now.
Yeah, and then halfway through, Daddy, I want to go to the loo.
Yeah, at least that's a kind of naturally noisy environment, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, I've had an experience of something a little bit like this performance of The Tempest, where I went to the opera, which is not something I'd ever done before. It was very, very grown up. It was Carmen at the Royal Albert Hall. It was a special occasion, really looking forward to it. And there was a little girl next to me who was probably about 9. It was in the evening, and she spent the whole time kind of twirling this dolly around and whispering to her mum. So at least she was whispering, we'll give her that, but I could still hear her, and it was kind of visually distracting as well. So eventually I said something, and I tried to use my nicest voice, would you mind, I hope you don't, that whole apologetic English thing. It didn't go down well, let's just say.
It never does. You've just brought a memory back to me where I had a mother and son behind me. I can't remember what the film was. And they were constantly crunching their huge popcorn bag. And every time there was a key line being delivered, all I could hear was this popcorn being crunched in the carton. And I did turn around, and I was very polite, and I said, would you mind awfully? And she gave me just filthy abuse.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You shouldn't have to feel terrible and be made to feel like the evil person in the room, in the stadium, in the theatre, for asking people to just have simple, good old-fashioned manners and consideration for others.
Well, we're going to agree. Thank you very much indeed. That's Leanne Hughes-Joshi, journalist and author who writes about parenting and family life. Well, we're going to get your calls, quite a few of them coming in already. 0345 6060 973. What's been your worst experience of this kind in a theatre or cinema, or indeed anywhere else? And do you think that the mother should have stood her ground and said, I'm sorry, I bought a ticket, I'm going to stay? Or do you have total sympathy with all of the people in the audience who didn't like it? 17 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
At Waitrose, you know you're a food lover when the delicious
It was a bus being set fire to, and I'm just looking at my TV screen now, and there's lots of fires going on. What's the latest?
Yeah, it seems to be that there was some peaceful protest earlier, and people just left and dispersed, without incident. However, in the last half hour, police have issued a new statement talking about there being sporadic pockets of disorder breaking out in a number of locations across Northern Ireland, and a number of vehicles have been set on fire. I think the one that you're referring to is probably the glider bus in East Belfast. So the Assistant Chief Constable Ryan Henderson is urging people to remain calm, act responsibly, and avoid any activity that could place themselves or others at risk. And obviously there are officers on the ground, the helicopters up in the air. You can see plumes of black smoke smoke across different parts of the city, and that includes, sort of interface areas, which is a little bit concerning. And I thought it was interesting that ACC Henderson said that we are appealing for calm and all voices of influence within communities to encourage peaceful protest and discourage any involvement in violence or disorder. So all voices of influence could cover a very wide range of people.
The police clearly suspected that this sort of thing would be happening tonight. I mean, maybe it's a bit too early to ask questions about their preparations for this. But given the fact that these protests seem to be taking place in more than one location, that has to be a concern as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the PSNI is usually primed for rioting pretty much every summer. It seems to be a summer activity, and it can be triggered by one incident or another. We know that there are lots of sort of young people and perhaps some older people as well on the streets with face coverings and balaclavas. There's no, I know it sounds ridiculous to say it's not serious at this point, but it hasn't moved into widespread violence, targeting of police. The images of burning vehicles are deeply disturbing, obviously. But the police up to this point are still describing it as sporadic pockets of disorder.
Amanda, thank you for bringing us up to date. That's Amanda Ferguson, LBC's Northern Ireland correspondent. Now, if you've just tuned in, we're talking about Sir Kenneth Branagh, who was in the middle of a performance of The Tempest when a baby basically interrupted it because it was cooing, it was gurgling, it was making noises. I'm not sure it was crying, because that was what I initially thought it was. But even that is enough to disturb an audience. And the audience demanded that the mother left, and she was told that she had to watch the performance on a screen in the theatre cafe. Have you had any similar experience? Let's go to China in Crystal Palace. China, hello.
Hello there. I haven't had any specific experience like that, but I am a new mum. I'm a mum of a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I'm very much new to this motherhood lifestyle, and I can understand where I guess the people are coming from when they've asked her to leave because of the interruption. But at the same time, I think policy should be put in place where there's some type of T's and C's where kids under a certain age can't enter into these kind of performance or auditoriums. If they're not, I guess, stated, then I believe then it's okay for children to be there. And the fact that she was, asked to leave, I think it's not fair on her because, again, yes, she has paid her money. The child wasn't crying. And, a lot of people find it quite sweet that, babies can Google and gaga. I understand that it may have been quite, annoying to hear that, but I don't know.
If you're in your living room and you're visiting your friend who's got a small child and it starts cooing and gurgling and whatever, absolutely fine, but not in a theatre.
I see where you're coming from. I think you did mention the cinema earlier, and again, with the cinema one, it's quite different because you obviously were quite against children going to cinemas point blank, but there are screenings for children. Like there are screenings for parents.
Absolutely.
For children.
No problem with that at all.
Yeah, and those who don't have children and go to those screenings should be very much aware and and understanding that I'm going to walk into this place and there may be noise. I think people should be a little bit more understanding that children are a part of it. It's all a part of life. Children are here. We bring children places. You have half terms. You have all these kind of breaks, and children will, at a time, be in places where you may be. And I think that's quite okay. To be fair, I think that's
I think it's generally okay, but not in. Why would you take I don't know what the age the baby was, but clearly quite young. Say it was several months old. Why on earth would you think it was appropriate to take a baby of that age to a theatre? I think it's incredibly selfish.
No, I do too, to be fair. But however, as a new mum, I do understand that, childcare isn't the easiest thing. And also, sometimes, I have taken my child, again, it is to a baby cinema. I've taken them to a baby cinema and I've enjoyed it, and so have they. They may not have understood exactly the film or, I guess, their surrounding, but sometimes it's for the parent too. And, take your child somewhere. You're experiencing them for the first time as well as they are.
And I get that. And I know there are lots of screenings where mothers can take small children, and I think that's almost a sort of community thing where you've got something in common with the rest of the audience. So obviously that's going to be a positive thing. But all I question is whether it's right in what I would call sort of normal performances, where you surely have to think about your environment and what is likely to happen, because even a child that is very small that will sleep throughout the evening normally, I mean, you've just got to expect that on this particular day it's probably going to make a noise, and therefore it's inevitably going to attract the ire of the rest of the audience. China, great call. Thank you very much. Margaret is in Clapham. Hello, Margaret.
Oh, Ian, I've been in fits of laughter ever since 9 o'clock listening to you with your introduction. So funny. So funny. I have got great experience in this. Now, regarding the theatre, my daughter was not a normal baby. She was like a doll. And I always remember I took her to the theatre in Wimbledon for the first time just 2 months before she was 3, which in my consideration and in my opinion is very unusual.
What did you go and see?
Oh, it was a Christmas panto. It was on Christmas Eve. And she was all dressed up with her beautiful curly hair and her long dress. And I always remember we were in the bar, like you do, and I saw people looking over at her. But at that age group, it was very unusual because she was not like a normal 2.5. She was 2 months off because her birthday's in February. I always remember it. But because she was so passive and so quiet as a child, she was very unusual, as children do at that age. That's why I decided to take her. Otherwise, I would never have done. I wouldn't have taken my son. And with the other lady who just called, in respect of the cinema, I mean, my daughter's now 30, and my son is 28, and I take younger members of my family to the theatre. I took them. Oh my gosh, Ian, listen to this. So at Christmas time, I took them to a pantomime in Putney. Now, nowadays in the theatres, they have, the drag queens.
Yeah.
So it was a children's performance, and we were on the second row, and the Putney Arts Theatre is beautiful. It's so cute. I would recommend. Now, in this performance, the drag queen comes in, to warm the audience up and do all their jokes. And he was very tall, and he started to talk to these 2 children in the front row who were, my niece was with me. She was 3, her first time to the theatre, and my other nephew, 6 or 7, nearly 7. And the drag queen scared the children, and they started roaring. They started beating the 2 of them. They were like 2 little brothers, and the mum had to whisk them out of the theatre, and then I think she brought them back, on the second half, so to speak. But the drag queen came out at different sorts of times as such in between the performance, and the children still were scared, so the mum had to keep taking them out. Now there was loads of children there, Ian, loads of children, but sometimes parents, if you're listening, you have to look and think, and I agree with you, a theatre is more you can take them to sort of some productions, but it depends on the child. And the cinema, I go to lots of children's screens, in the cinemas. I have a cinema card. I take my younger family members. My son comes with me. And even though you're watching a child film, people bring in babies and they're screaming in the cinema, and the mums are up and down, or fathers, whoever, running up and down the stairs, because obviously, they're not content, or they've woken up, or it's dark, or the noise of the screen.
Well, I think
is too much for them.
one of those performances, I can't see a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
But
the children are not happy. They are, much younger.
Yeah.
And although the cinema is packed with children, preschool and, school age, the younger ones, some of them just can't cope with the cinema. Like when my son was very, very young, he has a disability, but when he was young, very young, he was very difficult to cope with things. But I used to try him, so to speak. I used to call it a try-in. And the manager of the cinema used to let me go in for 10, 15 minutes. And then if we weren't successful, we'd stay. But if not, then we'd leave. But that was because of his disability. But lots of children don't like the noise, the dark, because it's much different than watching TV. Well,
the one thing that you have convinced me of is that I'm right about drag queen.
Right?
No, I'm right about drag queens. I loathe and detest them.
Oh, I think they're too scary. Even in the reception afterwards. So in Putney Arts Theatre, like a lot of theatres, then the actors all come out and meet everybody afterwards. And the drag queen, gentleman, he was very tall and he was dressed in his makeup and the dress and everything. Personally, I thought it was a little bit too much, but he kept cracking jokes at the guy next to me, next door, like sitting next to me, which was fine for us. But I noticed also in the reception area of the theatre that he also, he meant well, and he sort of tried to lean down to talk to the children, but some of them were very scared. Even my niece was a little bit timid, but she wasn't scared as such, whereas some of the other children dived for the door or buried their head in the mother's dress.
You see, I would have been with them. I don't know why it is. And see, I can say I loathe and detest drag queens, but most people couldn't say that, but I can because, you probably know. It's 9:32. Margaret, thank you. It's 9:32 on LBC. Let's get the latest news headlines from Katie Dartford.
Politicians across Northern Ireland are calling for calm following what's been described as a vicious knife attack. As crowds gather in the city tonight, protesters have set fire to a bus. A 30-year-old Sudanese national has been charged with attempted murder after the attack last night in Belfast. Donald Trump's accused Iran of shooting down a US Apache helicopter over the Strait of Hormuz. Both pilots are said to be safe and uninjured. The US president's threatening retaliation. And two men who threw a traffic cone and smoke grenades at police during disorder in Southampton following the murder of Henry Novak have been jailed. Both pleaded guilty to violent disorder. One also admitted possession of an offensive weapon after officers found a samurai sword in his Basingstoke bedroom when they came to arrest him. The pair, who are 41 and 24, have been sentenced to a combined total of almost 6 years. LBC weather: showers becoming less frequent into this evening, but remaining in the west. Winds easing and turning chilly with lows of 4 to 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
The last caller before we went to the news, I think she hit the nail on the head. Basically, adults are adults for a reason, and they need to take responsibility. And indulging a baby in the theatre does no favour for the baby, let alone the audience. We have swings and roundabouts in parks that children can enjoy. If they want to go to the theatre, then we have panto season.
Oh, no, we don't.
Yeah, and as they become older and more mature, if they wish to go to the theatre, fine, go to the theatre. I remember I used to take a large family group to panto, went on for years. I've also taken nieces to shows like Mary Poppins and Railway Children. They're child-orientated. They thoroughly enjoyed it. They're in their 20s now and they do their own thing. But surely it's inappropriate to take children, let alone babies, to a more adult-orientated, serious theatre.
Well, I completely agree with you. You see, this is one of those things where I thought when we were talking about shall we do this today, I did think, well, is anybody going to disagree that this mother was wrong to take a baby to a theatre? But I'm sure there are people out there who will, and do feel free to give me a call. Michael, I have a recommendation for you if you have young children that you want to take to see something. The Magic Faraway Tree film which is absolutely outstanding. It's not quite the same as the books, but it's close enough to the books for those of us who remember them, reading them as children. It's a really good, it's a relatively short film actually, which is good because films I think nowadays get to be a little bit too long. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's take this text from Jan, who says, I consider myself pretty easygoing, and if I was in the audience, I would put up with the disturbance or try to block out any noise as best I could. But it would not stop me wondering why on earth someone has brought a baby into the theatre. It would not occur to me to take a baby or a young child to a theatre production, mostly out of consideration for the performers, as much as the fellow audience members. Couldn't agree more, Jan. I think it's... I think my consideration would actually be for fellow audience members rather than necessarily the actors. But you're right. I mean, you have to think about both. Peter is in Bethnal Green. Hello, Peter.
Yeah, I had a situation when my daughter was, when she was a baby. We took her to see David Walliams, I think it was Mr. Smell or something, at Hackney Empire, and she wouldn't stop crying. And they made an announcement from the stage and asked the person who's crying, could they keep the baby quiet? If they couldn't keep the baby quiet, could they remove the baby? At which point my partner, she was very really angry, and so she started shouting back, and there was a little bit of toing and throwing. It was embarrassing. And they've ended up coming to our chair, and then they said, look, the best we can do for you is you can go and sit in one of the boxes.
Result.
Yeah, that's the way we think, yeah. But she didn't see it like that. She sort of looked at it as like we was being ostracised, which I can understand. And so every now and then my partner would make a comment and shout out a comment, this is disgusting, we're being treated like animals. And so she started making more noise than the kids. And it's hard to say because it was a kids' play. There were other kids there. But I don't know. You got to expect that with kids. You can't, you know.
And were you just cringing in embarrassment?
Yeah, I was cringing. I was happy when we got the box, like I say, because my kids would probably never see a box again. But yeah, no, it was just it was a nice day out, and it got turned into like turmoil.
I remember. This is about 10 years ago. Have you heard of the composer Don Black? He's written, I mean, you will know a lot of the songs that he's written over the years, but he's not, I mean, he's well known, but there was a tribute to Don Black, and you had like really famous singers at the London Palladium, each singing the songs that he'd written for them. I think Lulu was there, Take That were there, all sorts of different artists. And I had booked, get me, the Royal Box. And at half time, someone opened the door and said, would you mind awfully if Mr. Black came and sat with you for the second half, because he keeps being pestered by people in the audience. So we had literally the person whose music we'd come to appreciate sit with us for the second half of the show in the Royal Box at the London Palladium. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's a good night out, definitely, yeah. Was he good to talk to? Did you make conversation with him?
Yeah, no, it's really easy to talk to, mainly because he didn't have any children with him. Okay, thank you.
I don't know any music that he's done, but yeah.
Well, I think he did lots of Dionne Warwick and lots of 60s, 70s songs. Right. Google him, and you will undoubtedly know some of the songs that he's written. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you.
Right. Love the show, says an anonymous texter. I was at a baptism this week. One of the congregation lit a cigarette in the service. What? After being admonished and walking out, the priest struggled to control the event. Halfway through, he declared, "Get out of this house," stormed off stage, and the baptism was over. Never seen anything like it. God, if that was filmed, that would be a real hit on Instagram or YouTube, wouldn't it? Carol is in Stevenage. Carol, good evening.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Somebody's just corrected me that Don Black is a lyricist, not a composer. See, I've started something there, haven't I? Anyway, what would you like to say, Carol?
Well, I think it's more or less been said, actually, by everyone. I don't know what noise this baby was making, but I would not. You know, I'm a grandmother of 4. I would not take any of my children or my grandchildren, or my children when they were children, babies, to a show like that. When you have children, I think you sort of accept life is a bit different. So you go to things like this time last year, we took my grandson, who was 3, to see a preschool show, and it was noisy. It was not something we would have chosen ourselves to go and entertain us, but it was for him, you know, the same as, and also you had to buy him a ticket. So I don't know, did you have to buy the baby a ticket?
That detail is not available to me.
Yeah. And then moving on, because obviously we talked about the theatre, I took one of my children, because I only had one at the time, he was under a year, to his uncle's wedding.
Oh.
And he started making noises. And I read the room and I thought, let me just take him out. I'd already positioned myself somewhere where I could easily take him out.
Yeah, because you're a thoughtful person.
You know, so we did that, you know, and in fact, I met a few other relatives out there with their children. You know, that's what you do. You think about other people and you're considerate for other people. Now, I have actually taken some of my grandchildren to football matches as well. So, but again, I've taken them to ladies' games because there's less swearing going on, and it's just it's a different atmosphere to a man's Premier League game. But again,
can I tell you, do you know, I got admonished the other day because I used the word lady, and I said, oh no, you're not allowed to say ladies anymore. I said, what?
Okay. Well, anyway, I don't know what to say now. but again, when you take children to things like that, you accept that they'll want to go to the loo, you know, when the penalty's been taken, or, you know, you just have to do. No one has complained to me about children at a football match, to be honest. It's the adults that sometimes can be the problem. But, you know, life changes when you have children, and you have to read the room as well. So the woman who took why would you go and watch a Shakespeare company with a baby? You're not going to enjoy that yourself. You know, are you? Because there'll be that distraction.
Well, I wouldn't have thought so, but clearly she made the decision to do it. Carol, thank you very much. Sophia says, Iain, I'm an actor and have performed in several West End productions. I once did a one-woman show about the refugee crisis, including a scene where a woman drowns. At the most inappropriate moment imaginable, someone's phone went off playing I Do Like to Be Beside the Seaside. Oh, can you imagine that? It completely shattered the atmosphere, took both me and the audience out of the moment, and it still haunts me to this day. As for bringing a baby into a theatre performance, I think that's incredibly selfish. I can't believe the staff allowed it in the first place. I wish I'd seen your text at the beginning of the hour, Sophia, or you'd sent it at the beginning of the hour, because we could have had a great texter about terrible moments in the theatre that you have experienced. Well, we've still got 15 more minutes, so if you want to send in a text on that, 84850. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Kemi Badenoch says she wants the police to stop and search more black boys. She says an obsession with diversity has got in the way of common sense. Is she right? Plus, is university now a complete waste of time?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
5 across, full of positive swagger. Sorry, at HMRC we can't help you fill gaps in a crossword. But our new website can fill gaps in your pension and tax knowledge. Nothing cryptic, just simple explanations about the basics to help you get tax confident and understand how tax works in retirement. To learn more, search HMRC Tax Confident. Oh, that's it. Confident.
Here's a tale of two commuters. Steve was in a rush and needed to park near the station. Jane also needed a space and booked in advance with Your Parking Space. Steve had a meeting at 9 and panic at 8. Nowhere to park. Jane, she's already in the office and enjoying that morning latte. With Your Parking Space, you can browse thousands of spaces across London and reserve one instantly. Use the code GET10 for £10 off your first booking. Download the Your Parking Space app today.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Get that Toyota electric feeling with the all-new, all-electric Toyota Urban Cruiser. Available with 0% APR representative and £1,500 deposit contribution. And save £1,500 with the Toyota Electrified Saving. Visit your nearest Toyota centre. Price from $29995. Available on Toyota PCP when financed through Toyota Financial Services by 30th of June 2026. Optional final payment indemnities may be required. See website conditions apply.
Gordon Ramsay here. Somewhere out there, someone is trying to sear a steak in a pan that belongs in the bin. Don't be that person. That's why I use Hexlad in my kitchens. Their hybrid range gives you the durability of cast iron, the searing power of stainless steel, and the white, clean ease of non-stick, all in one pan. Pro-level performance with every cook. Shop the summer sale now at hexlad.co.uk.
Iain Dale on LBC.
9:47, Nigel in Croydon says, Ian, I think you're a little out of touch. It has been said before, Nigel. There are cinemas that do baby clubs that allow babies in the cinema. Everyman Cinema Group is one. Instead of creating a divide, why not use the opportunity to encourage the theatre groups to do a family-friendly performance fortnightly or monthly? The world is polarised enough. Let's stop creating unnecessary divides. I don't think I'm creating divides. I mean, given that everybody's agreed with me so far, I don't think there is a divide apart from between sensible people and the mother who took the child to the performance. Let's go to James in Cobham. Hello, James.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
So I tour a theatre show. I tour a magic show, which is, we do quite sort of healthy-sized theatres is probably the right way of putting it. I don't have too much of a problem with babies or children, actually, I suppose, in the theatre. I think you kind of want to sort of, I guess I sort of started seeing theatre when I was super young, but I think the problem is the courtesy, I guess. I have a lot more problems with sort of adults than I do with kids, I suppose. And it's, I'm sort of up at the Fringe this year, as I see.
Tell me, send me a link to your show and I might come and see you.
Yeah. It's called Showman, but let's leave that one up. But they've got a Babes in Arms policy, and I guess it's kind of, I'll do some theatres, and most of the time, 95% of the time, you won't have any problems with anyone. But occasionally, there's someone that's too drunk, or something. And I think there's a two sides to that in terms of dealing with it, I guess. And it's the same thing with this, I guess, which is you've got to have this sort of courtesy with people around you. Like, everything is kind of fine as long as you're not disturbing the rest of the audience, I guess. And I think if the baby is disturbing the rest of the audience, then you just have courtesy to other people that are in the room with you. But then we've got kind of a process for if anyone's disturbing, and we've kind of got like a 3-strike sort of rule, I guess, before they kind of get a polite nod from an usher or something along those lines. I have a sort of a slight hesitation to not allowing mothers who can't get childcare or any of those sorts of things to come and see a show. And I think 90% of the time, with respect,
doing a magic show and putting on a performance of The Tempest are two different atmospheres, aren't they?
Well, I guess the difference is that I have a certain degree of dynamism to be able to call it out, right? I guess I can break that fourth wall that they can't. But I guess the point still stands, though, right? If I have a sneezing fit in the Tempest, I'm going to go and take myself out and excuse myself because I wouldn't want to disturb the people around me. I think it's a similar sort of thing. I think, it's just having a courtesy to other people in the room.
Couldn't agree more. Very good luck at the Fringe, James. Thank you very much indeed for calling in. Jessica says, I'm a new mum. There are plenty of baby-friendly performances which welcome tiny hecklers. Brands like Bring Your Own Baby, Everyman Baby Cinema, etc. That's 2 mentions of them. Plenty of options for those of us with little people and a mutual understanding of noise, feeding, smells. Yes, let's go to Philip in St John's Wood. Hello, Philip.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. What would you like to say?
First of all, I didn't really know that LBC was such an elitist show. I'm saying, I thought, like, when I was younger and I wanted to bring my kids, it wasn't because, like, why not bring my kids? It was because I can't afford childcare. And honestly, I think it should be the other way around, that all the old farts, if you don't mind me saying, should should watch it on their computer at home.
Can I give you an argument-winning argument, Philip? If you go and see The Tempest at Royal Shakespeare Company, Stratford-upon-Avon, you're paying in excess of £100 a ticket. Don't tell me you can't afford childcare if you can afford to pay £100 a ticket.
Well, you see, the story which I'm talking about was when I went on a honeymoon with my wife for the first time, and then we wanted to treat ourselves, and we had a kid, and we couldn't afford extra expenses. So we didn't want to watch our kid gurgling the whole night. We wanted to go to a performance. We didn't have enough money, so how's that?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to make any judgment on you at all. I genuinely don't think I'm being elitist here. I mean, I'm sure I don't know what the background of this lady was, sort of whether she would have described herself as middle class, working class, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's the principle of taking a child to a performance at the risk of not only interfering with the performance, but also spoiling the enjoyment of the fellow theatre goers. I don't think it's elitist to say that.
Okay, and one more point. Honestly, I don't think I agree with you on this point at all, because
I can tell.
I think it's dependent on which way you look at it. But another point which I'd like to say is that, come on, it's just a baby crying. What are you? You don't have any. I'm saying most people have kids. That's just the way of the world. I'm saying just a baby crying. It doesn't disturb everything.
Well, it does if you're in a Shakespeare performance.
It doesn't really come on.
Well, clearly it did. Otherwise, the people wouldn't have complained.
Well, you're bringing me a proof from a one-off situation.
Well, to be fair, it's not one-off, because we've had all sorts of situations being reported in cinemas and, well, mainly theatres in recent years where, I mean, mobile phones, I think, is a really big problem. And you've had really famous actors on stage actually stop a performance and demand that people switch off their mobile phones because they're disturbing the actors on the stage and they can't perform properly, which ruins it for the rest of the audience. And I completely get that.
Mobile phones is a totally different story. It's not necessary at all.
It's the same principle, though. You're disturbing the rest of the audience and the actors on stage.
But what should I do with my kids? I can't exactly lock them in the cupboard.
No, you can't. Should we leave it there?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much. Levison says that woman had a duty of responsibility to find alternative care for her child. It has a father, grandparents and all. Well, yeah, easy to say that. Not all kids grow up in a two-parent household. Not all kids have grandparents that they can fall back on. Anyway, it continues. One could have done the job of caring while the mother enjoyed the concert. We don't see many young mothers taking kids to nightclubs, so why take a kid to a quiet environment? Well, that's an interesting one. Has anybody ever seen a baby in a nightclub? I don't think they'd be allowed in, would they? So if they're not allowed into a nightclub, why should you allow a baby into a theatre? Rhetorical question. Tony's in East Kilbride. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Ian. While I've been listening, I've done a 45-degree turn on this.
Oh, dear. Only 45 degrees?
Only 45 degrees. First of all, I'm with you 100% on drag queens.
Oh, no. I've been told that I'm wicked for saying what I did, that just because I'm gay, I shouldn't use such strong language.
Shoulder to shoulder with you. But I'm also anti-Lulu and Gary Barlow. Tiresome nonsense. Did Lulu sing Shout at the concert? Well, there's a surprise, eh? The thing about this, everybody says there's a time and a place for everything. Well, I don't mind if a baby's crying on a plane or in the church.
Oh, no. God save me from babies on planes.
No, but you were a baby once.
I know, but I never went on a plane.
Well, you probably didn't until you were about 10. So I think you're about the same age as me. So
13. I went to Leningrad.
There you go. So
on Dan Air.
There's
clapped when it landed.
And you can tolerate. What puzzles me is like when people let babies scream and don't stick a dummy in it. The dummy is the greatest invention known to man. Stick a dummy in. See if that shuts it up.
Oh no! However, I'm going to be a complete hypocrite here because I don't like seeing babies with dummies in their mouths.
No, but they're magic.
I know they stop the baby from making a noise, so I ought to like them.
But you don't want them with a dummy.
I think there's something very disturbing about mothers or fathers who constantly put dummies in their parents' mouth. I think the kids should be taken away by social services.
I can tell you've never had kids.
You're completely right, and I'm very glad that I haven't.
The reason I've done a 45-degree turn on this is because perhaps the mum, maybe she was after a bit of notoriety and a bit of causing a stink and what have you, but maybe she was just at her wit's end. Let's cut the girl some slack. Maybe she was just,
okay. Well, seeing as we've only got two,
I wouldn't have took my kid to watch. The Tempest is a terrible play anyway.
You know your Shakespeare better than I do. I'll take your word for that. Thank you very much, Tony. Let's finish the hour with Simon in Watford. What pearls of wisdom do you have to entertain us with, Simon?
Happy Tuesday, Ian. How are you?
Very well.
Well, we went to a Celine Dion concert.
Oh dear.
And
really?
spent an act. What do you mean, oh dear?
I never really liked her.
Well, we spent a lot of money going to see her, and then behind me was someone that was wooing. Now, your glamorous assistant asked me to do an impersonation of this, so it went a bit woo, and it was through all of the hits.
Don't give up the day job.
No, I won't. And then it got to the point where Celine started to talk about her recently deceased husband, and everyone was quiet, and this wooing just continued right behind me. And you know when you just thought, right, that's it, I'm going to turn round. And as I turned round, it was a young disabled girl. And I had to kind of stop completely.
Oh, that would have taken the wind out of your sails.
Well, I had to kind of just do that international kind of thumb and index finger thing when you're pushing them together to say, please be quiet.
Let me finish by asking you, can you name me the song that Celine Dion won the Eurovision Song Contest with when she was singing, I think, for Switzerland?
Something... no, something pass at the end.
No, you're on the right. Yeah, ne partez pas sans moi. I could sing it to you, but Chris is just reminding me that we have 10 seconds of the programme left. So luckily I won't. Thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, it is NK.
No, come on, Ian, give us 10 seconds. Go on, fire away.
Oh, someone. That's all you get.
Keep going.
No.
You've got 50, you've got 45 seconds to
fill. Enough, Benjamin.
Thank you, Ian. We'll save. Call him up on that tomorrow. Get him to do the rest of the verse. Thanks very much indeed, Ian. Hello there. A very, very good evening. Welcome to Late Nights with Ben Kentish here on LBC. Coming up.
When black boys are searched more knives are found. So we can't leave people to carry knives because we think that we searched enough people for today.
Kemi Badenoch lays out her plan to roll back diversity and equality rules. And in particular, she wants the police to stop and search far more black boys than they currently do. Critics say it's an excuse for racial profiling. She says it's just common sense. What about you? Should more black boys be stopped and searched?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 10 o'clock, a bus in Belfast has been set ablaze as protesters react to last night's stabbing in the north of the city. A 30